Growth Officer for Noble 9, as Kit explains why attaining and maintaining service-level objectives has become more critical in the wake of the company receiving an additional $15 million in funding. Then, Mike interviews Peter Smales, General Manager for Enterprise Container Management at SUSE, as Peter dives into why mainstream adoption of cloud-native applications is finally starting to happen across enterprise IT. And that's what we have coming up for you in this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for February 27th. First up, Baidu, one of the largest search and AI companies in China, has revealed its plan to incorporate its AI chatbot, Ernie, into search services starting in March. The chatbot will be used in all aspects of Baidu's business, including search and cloud search services, smart car operating systems, and smart speakers. Baidu stated that AI technology has reached a critical point, and all sectors will inevitably undergo transformation, so they're starting this process early. This comes during a heated battle between Microsoft and Google over the development and deployment of AI in both companies' respected search engines. The release of Ernie is part of Baidu's efforts to create a ChatGPT equivalent for China, as China looks to the tech industry to revive its economy after the pandemic and years of regulatory scrutiny. Next up, Google is conducting a test to determine a possible reaction to Canada's proposed Online News Act, Bill C-18. The bill would require companies such as Google and Meta to negotiate compensation deals with Canadian media outlets for the use of their content. In response, Google has blocked some of Canadian users from accessing all type of news content, including content created by Canadian broadcasters and newspapers. The test will continue for approximately 5 weeks and will affect the search engine and the Discover feature on Android devices. Google's concerns regarding the bill are that it is too broad, does not require publishers to adhere to basic journalistic standards, and could lead to the spread of low-quality clickbait content. However, those in support of the bill say it will allow for more fair compensation for journalists. The bill has been passed by the Canadian House of Commons and will be examined by the Senate in the upcoming months. In other news, the European Union's executive branch has temporarily banned TikTok from phones used by employees due to concerns over the video sharing app's security and data privacy. The corporate management board has suspended TikTok's use on devices issued to staff or personal devices that staff use for work as what they are calling a cybersecurity measure. The ban follows similar moves in the US, where more than half of the states and Congress have banned TikTok from official government devices. TikTok has 125 million users in the European Union, so TikTok has requested a meeting to discuss its continued enhancement to its data security approach. This being said, the suspension will require staffers to delete TikTok from devices used for professional business by March 15th. Next up, Amazon has finalized its purchase of One Medical, a primary care provider, for $3.9 billion. The acquisition is part of Amazon's expansion into the healthcare industry, which also includes Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon Clinic, a patient-to-doctor messaging service. One Medical currently operates over 214 medical offices in 20 markets and serves over 800,000 members through virtual care and in-person visits. This being said, there have been concerns from anti-monopoly groups about the acquisition's potential to harm patient privacy and competition. The Federal Trade Commission plans to review possible negative impacts on competition and consumers resulting from Amazon's control and use of sensitive consumer health information held by One Medical, despite not planning on taking any current legal action. On DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at DevOps use cases for AI-assisted Kubernetes. An AI-assisted Kubernetes orchestrator can offer so many benefits to companies running containerized applications. This article looks at particular use cases and the roadmap ahead for implementing it. To learn more, go to DevOps.com. On Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at a report showing the progress of the shift to Zero Trust. The report, which was conducted by Okta, found that 22% of companies analyzed have deployed one or more Zero Trust configurations. This being said, though, the deployment of security tools grew 23% from last year, and several other security features, such as VPNs and training tools, also increased in adoption. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. Finally, on Container Journal, we have an article that looks at how Isovalent has delivered an update to the open source Cilium network to add support for the Gateway API and integrations with Grafana. The updates, which will ultimately increase observability and improve identity and certificate management, is meant to make networking in Kubernetes environments more accessible. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Welcome, everyone, back to Techstrong TV. My name is Sharon Florentine. I am the managing editor here at Techstrong Group. I am joined today by Ron Neeson. He is, well, I'm going to let Ron tell you a little bit about himself and his company and title. And Ron, take it away. You'll say it better than I ever could.
Sure thing. Thanks for hosting me, Sharon. I'm Ron. Nice to meet you. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, moved to Israel, and enlisted in Unit A200, which you might be familiar with. Did classic operational cybersecurity there for many years, along with Avi, my co-founder. Both did a long journey together in research and development. And we were really, really drawn towards permission management as honestly kind of the combination of something super important and yet so boring, nobody wanted anything to do with it. It was kind of the unsexy part of security. And yet we felt that it was, everyone was talking about like all this next gen security stuff. But when you look at what companies were getting compromised for, even the most recent Okta and Uber compromises, it was very much boring old like IT or customer success having too many privileges. And so we knew there was something interesting to be done there. And we started our journey very humble, just interviewing a ton of security professionals, asking them what their challenges were. And they all kept drawing us back towards the challenges of governance of access. So knowing who has access to what, taking away access when it's no longer needed. And we were really lucky that we spoke with the IT and DevOps side as well. And we realized that many of the challenges that security teams faced in governance of access actually originated upstream in the IT and DevOps departments and how employees got permissions to begin with. So when you joined your company, what was the process that you went through, to get access? And we're all familiar with the old story of opening a ticket to IT and, it's taking them forever to give me access. And so there are a lot of direct challenges with the manual way that permissions are processed today, whether it's just employee efficiency and how long it takes them to get access. But, somewhere around 30% of tickets that IT DevOps departments process are access requests. And so that manual process obviously becomes a burden. But what we learned is that the biggest challenge actually is the security side of things. So because IT and DevOps are doing their things manually, it's become really hard to know exactly who had access, when they had that access, is it still relevant? And so we realized that if we automate that process, ideally everyone will love it. So business will be more efficient. IT and DevOps won't have to do this manual work, and security corely will be able to know exactly what's going on, get visibility into the different applications, different processes. And that's kind of what led us to where we're doing what we're doing today. We raised a total of $15 million and now have a lot of companies that trust us to be the backbone of their company from a permission management perspective.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, first of all, on that raise. And, I understand you're coming out of stealth with this. So you've talked a little bit about the problems that led you to developing this solution, but how does that tie into the buzzwords that we're hearing of, zero trust security and principle of least privilege and all of those things? Because I know a lot of IT and business leaders aren't going to really get down into the nitty gritty. They're going to hear those buzzwords and go, okay, well, how does this solve that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question because that's one of the things that, I'm honestly a little buzzword allergic. I'm always scared to name drop buzzwords, right? And to the point where it's probably playing against us, right? People kind of need to know what category to put you in. But least privilege and zero trust is the big driver of why to manage access in the first place, right? Because, if I always joke that stereotypically what IT want is to give everyone access to everything because that's the easiest. And what security want is no one to have access to anything because then, it's secure because no one can do anything.
Yeah.
And the question is always, how do you strike that balance? And least privilege and zero trust speaks towards the importance of being granular and defining exactly what people actually need. But the challenge is often the business implications and how to make sure that you're not restraining the business by restraining people's access. And that's exactly what we're looking to strike the balance, exactly what Entitle is looking to do. So being on the one side, both a business enabler by driving the business forward, by reducing SLAs, by improving the process, but also giving security the least privilege approach that they're looking for. And a big part of that is just-in-time access or temporary access to sensitive resources, because you're always, security teams, IT teams are going to define some sort of policy, but the challenge is what happens to that policy over time. The business changes, it shifts. And creating a just-in-time approach has enabled companies to be much more agile on one hand, so giving people what they need when they need it, but on the other hand, making sure that people don't have what they need for longer than what they need. So whether it's admin roles and removing that access when it's no longer needed, or PII databases, or production access, all these services, which are very important to know exactly who's admin there, exactly what's going on, and removing that when it's no longer needed.
So is this a cloud-based SaaS delivered solution? Is this a on-premises? How logistically does it work?
So that's the beauty of how we're tackling things. So by being very cloud-centric, we're able to provide an out-of-the-box solution for what companies need to manage their cloud access. Now, the challenge is often trusting a vendor with the ability to manage access to your companies is challenging. Like, it's not something that's not taken lightly. We don't take that trust lightly. And so we've built security into the product, both from an organizational perspective and just creating policies in place that enable to make and that make sure that we're hold ourselves accountable, for that. But mainly, and this is kind of what usually people are looking for, is we have a hybrid deployment model. So we do have a fully cloud hosted model, and that's often easier to install, but a lot of companies will want to self-host a certain part of the solution, which ensures that the API tokens never leave their environment. And so basically what it ensures that it's just much more secure, and that if one customer gets compromised or one vendor gets compromised, it doesn't transfer into other vendors, and so basically you can go either way. You can self-host, you can have the hybrid deployment, which is, by the way, very easy to install. Like, one click from the GUI, it's up and running inside your own cloud environment. You can host it in AWS, GCP, Azure, whatever you'd like. Very flexible.
Awesome. Works for everyone.
Yeah, that's the idea.
So what else did you want to discuss here? What else should people know about Entitle, about the security problems you're trying to solve?
I think it might be worth outlining how the product works de facto, like what this actually looks like. And so the solution, actually, I'll take a step back. Permission management has two core aspects, right? Governance, the retrospective, provisioning, the operations. And a big driver, we mentioned least privilege, a big driver is that of permission management is often the compliance side of things. But we believe that, good governance, good compliance is a byproduct of an automated and tight provisioning process. So we want to make sure that employees are actually getting what they need and not more than that. And so we've created a platform that has four core aspects. One is a self-service aspect, meaning employees can request access through what they need. Slack, Teams, Jira, ServiceNow, it doesn't matter. We call it front-end agnostic exactly for that reason. And basically, an employee puts in a request, it's processed by the policy engine. And so security teams have a no-code policy engine where they can define a different approval processes based off the different risk profiles. So if you are on call, that might be a more lenient approval process because that's an emergency. And if you're requesting access to a database that has PII information, maybe that should be treated with more care because that's very sensitive access. If it's an admin or if it's a read-only roles, those are two very different risk profiles that entail different approval processes. And so this is a very flexible tool that you can take and adapt into whatever your environment, whatever is right for you, because different companies do permission management differently. And so it's a very flexible tool. Third aspect is the actual API fulfillment. So we come out of the box with a ton of integrations into basically everything, hopefully everything that you need. That companies need. And so this is everything from corporate SaaS applications to dev SaaS applications, databases, cloud infrastructure, very wide range of integrations that enable us to provide very quick time to value. So we have very wide coverage for whatever the company needs. Within a few hours, it's already up and running. And so that removes the need for IT DevOps to provision that access. Because again, when you want access to GitLab, we will go to that GitLab repository, get you that access. You want access to MongoDB table, we will go to MongoDB and get you that access. And the same can be said, obviously, for many of the other applications. And the fourth aspect is the governance, and that's the kind of retrospective. Because once we're the source of truth, once we're the ones that are, again, giving and taking away access, it's really easy to know exactly who had, when they had, what was going on, why they got it. Is it still relevant? Should I remove it? That's kind of a byproduct of all the different automation and central source of truth that we've defined. And so one of the powerful ways that we've been tackling this is that we've been pulling into information from a lot of different sources. So we integrate with your HR management system, so we know exactly what's going on. We integrate with your identity provider, so we know which users exist. We have obviously researched these different applications, so we know exactly what the permission model is there. And we integrate with, PagerDuty and OpsDuty, so we know who's on call, with training systems, so we know which training you've gone through, with data tagging solutions, so we know which information is sensitive, where there's PII, so on and so forth. And so pulling all this information to a central platform enables you to create policies across the organization that couldn't be done before.
Wow. Where do you store all that data? How does that work?
So again, it goes back to whatever, if the customer wants to self-host this information, or they want us to completely host it for them. The idea is, again, quick time to value, quick implementation time. And so, whether either way you choose within, like, let's say a day, usually we call it a few hours, but let's say a day, it's fully operational, fully integrated with a lot of your applications.
That's amazing.
I think especially like in a permission management world, historically, permission management projects are renowned for taking forever and never seeing success. And that's been our biggest challenge, or our biggest goal, is to create a product that a IAM professional, a DevOps professional, IT security professional, whoever's responsible for this in the organization, can see real success within a few hours, already roll this out to employees.
If there's anything else that you wanted to talk to us about.
Maybe one more thing I wanted to add is, I mentioned there are a lot of different stakeholders in permission management, right? There's security that care about permission management. They're the ones that care about least privilege. There's IT and DevOps that do the actual work and provisioning that access. And there's the business units that are the ones that actually know what's going on, right? The person that knows whether or not you need access is often not the IAM guy that's sitting wherever. It's the manager that knows what's going on. And so being able to create a collaboration platform where all these different stakeholders can define a centralized policy, and every business unit can all of a sudden be control their own destiny, know what's going on, and the ability to recommend ownership. So basically decentralizing or delegating the responsibility, empowering the business units with the ability to make the right decision on that in that access. And from a security perspective, that makes much more sense too. And that's one of the things that's been driving us. We're all security researchers by training. We all come from a security background, and permission management's often a very IT world, right? And so being able to bring the two together and bring a security-centric mindset to an IT operations world and enabling the business while we're at it, I think that a lot of security products we're lucky in that a lot of security products are often seen as taking away from the business, right? It's only adding burden. And Tidal is one of those few security platforms where, our security experience has enabled us to create a very, very powerful security solution, but we're also an enabler of the business as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Ron, so much for coming on and talking to us about Entitle today. And I am sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about you guys and the company in the future. So congratulations again. And we will be talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Sharon. It was great meeting you. Thanks for having me.
You as well. And stay tuned, folks, because we've got a lot more great content coming up for you on Techstrong TV. Stick around.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here on Techstrong TV. I'm happy to be joined by my friend Or Weiss. Or, of course, is the CEO founder of Permit, Permit.io website. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing Or in person, as well as here on Techstrong. Or, first of all, welcome back. I hope all is well with you.
Thanks for having me. It's great being here. Since we last talked, I've become a parent myself. I've
Good for you.
Baby boy.
Mazel tov, as they say over here in Florida.
Thank you very much, and I'm excited in Florida. Yeah, for sure. You're also here in Israel.
Go figure.
I'm kind of excited on both raising a human being and raising a startup. I keep seeing common themes between the two. And,
there are some common things, but there's nothing better than raising a human being. I love my startups, but you'll see. You'll say I told you. Anyway, so congratulations on that. For those who there are people out here maybe who have heard of Permit or have not heard of Permit, why don't we just quickly give them a quick level set what Permit.io does?
Sure. So Permit is a solution to add permissions to your product with the premise of you never having to build permissions again. If you ever used software in the past, and I bet you did, you probably noticed that there are a lot of access control experiences built into that. To name a few, user management with the ability to assign roles, API key management, audit logs, multi-tenancy, approval flows, etc., etc., etc. And every time you saw those, some poor schlep of a developer had to create them from scratch. So instead of doing that over and over and wasting time, you can use Permit and actually focus on building your product and be confident that you're having the best access control that is available out there.
Excellent. All right. So I think we've laid the groundwork. I wanted to spend the bulk of our time today talking about a new offering from Permit. I think you call it Permit Elements.
Right. So Permit Elements, kind of like Stripe Elements, we took a lot of inspiration from how they build their software. So I've kind of touched on this with the premise: when you're building software, there's a lot that you need to do with access control. Some of it is in the back end, in the enforcement itself, and how you create the infrastructure to enforce access in real time and use things like policy as code and the event-driven architecture that supports that. But another thing that you need is also the experiences for the end customers and for the other stakeholders. You want, for example, when your product managers need to add another role into the system, you want them to be able to do it on their own. When your customers want to see what they did within the system, you want to enable them to do that on their own so they don't have to bug you for every little thing. And in the end of the day, you have two options. You either build these experiences yourself, or you use Permit and you have them ready-made and you bake them into your software. So we provide them as iframe and then as React components, and they're customizable enough so you can enjoy the power of them, but still have them on brand and on theme with what you're building. And it's just like with Stripe, for example, if you want to add a shopping cart or if you want to add a billing page, you'll be able to take those ready-made elements and embed them into your software. And with Permit, it's the same. If you want the audit log screen, if you want user management with those roles, if you want another user to be able to ask permissions from their colleagues, that's all ready for you to use. You don't need to build it. And there's a lot of smart mechanics built into that. And we can also talk about how by using these mechanics, everyone kind of benefits because of the smart underlayers, the user behavior analytics that are kind of shared between accounts.
I love it. So, of course, look, this is the whole user access and control is, in my mind, it's the killer app in the cloud, right? It's the killer kind of security piece in the cloud as well. I always, you mentioned Stripe has something called Elements, but of course this is different, right?
Right.
What drove you and the team to say, hey, you know what, this is something that's needed. This is how we should do this.
Bottom line, our customers. So when we
it's always the customer.
Yeah, the customer is always right, and you better listen. And I think something that is unique to us, I'd even brag and saying we are developers ourselves. We've been hands-on developers till the moment we founded the company, and also a lot within the company itself. And we realized something that I think some of our competitors haven't. I think when you talk to our competitors and you ask them, what do developers want? They'll say things like, developers want really complex technology that enables them to build amazing things. And while that's true on the surface, it kind of misses the point in the authorization space. Because in the authorization space and in similar fields, developers basically don't give a rat's ass about this. They want to focus on actually building their product. This
Absolutely.
is a nuance and an annoyance that adds a lot of friction from the core things that you want to do. Just like you don't want to build your own encryption, you don't want to build your own authentication, you don't really want to build your own authorization. So by just providing them with a policy engine or just providing them with the infrastructure or APIs to build this, you're not really solving the problem for them. You're leaving most of the pain on the table for them to tackle. And that's not the right way, I think, to approach this. I think the right way is to take this end-to-end off the table so developers can focus on what they actually care about building their core features in the product. And in order to do so, you need to take care of the experience end-to-end. You need to deliver the interfaces, the UI components themselves that the developers can delegate to their fellow stakeholders, product, security, compliance, support, professional services, and most importantly, to the end customers themselves, who, at the end of the day, need to be able to work with that software with those access control elements or experiences.
Got it. So this is available right now?
Yeah, it's available for everyone in self-service. You can just go into Permit. We kind of guide you to both apply the enforcement itself, apply the SDK or plugins that will actually toggle access within your application. But we also enable you to start right off with the elements themselves. If you want a user management screen, if you want API key management, if you want audit logs, you can use those independently of the enforcement itself. Obviously, if you use it with the enforcement, you gain the benefits of the two. So, for example, when you enforce access, that automatically generates audit logs. You don't need to call another API to register the fact that one user tried to perform an action. That automatically gets registered just by you checking for access. So it will automatically populate for your customer the ability to see what they did within their tenant.
Love it. So you can get it self-serve. What costs? How do you're lucky, you got to make money. Yeah.
So we're a PLG company, so we're using usage-based pricing. So the main metric is how many monthly active users you have, meaning how many identities you check permissions for on a monthly basis. So it doesn't matter how many authorization queries you do or how many instances of permit you deploy. On your side, we provide a microservice for authorization for you. So you can deploy that as many instances of that as you want, and it scales with your software. In the end of the day, you only care about how many identities you check permissions for.
Excellent. Great. So you can get this permit.io. Encourage everyone to go check it out. I want to pivot a little bit. So an announcement came out from Amazon about I guess it's a new language, really, but around access and control. Tell us about it. I'm assuming you know about it. Tell us about it a little bit.
I do, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. So a lot of people, when they're building their access control, they're taking inspiration from Amazon, and a lot of people have been looking at the Amazon and the AWS IAM, how you do like access control for infrastructure components within AWS. And that has kind of been misleading people. They've been coupling the infrastructure level access control that they have with their own application level. So for example, they couple the application level access control with access to an S3 bucket, for example. That's a very bad idea, and Amazon has recognized that as well. And they've said, okay, we need an application level access control solution that people can use. And in the interim before Amazon came in, other players like OPA and also, as maybe another example, have created policy engines for people to use, and some of them have become popular. But what's unique here is that a significant player like AWS is coming in and says, yes, a policy language is something that we need. Application level authorization is something that we need to address, and we can't couple it with our infrastructure level access control. And there's a room for a language here that will be simple enough for people to use in the cloud. So this at first, I think it's an important step in the maturity of this space, in the maturity of authorization languages. And it's also an important step in how we see the market. A lot of the other players, unlike Permit, have been kind of tooting, we have our own policy engine, you should use only that. We, from day one, said this should be engine agnostic. We should support multiple languages because you need the right tool for the right task. And now AWS is adding a very significant tool to this toolbox. So we've kind of adopted it very early on. So this, I think in general, increases the maturity of this entire space. I think this brings us into awareness for everyone. But it also raises a lot of interesting questions. So AWS has took a step forward with this. What about other clouds? Which languages would you use when you're working between multiple clouds, or you're working with hybrid cloud? How would you work with this with maybe some still on-prem deployments that you have? So we're trying as Permit, we're trying to answer that as well. We're providing a layer on top that you can use both with OPA and Cedar and with other languages. But as a whole, the market still needs to kind of decide on this. And I think we're just seeing the start of both the complexity and the new solutions that are going to be coming in from the big vendors and the small vendors alike.
Excellent. Sometimes when you're in AWS's position, right, you can really kind of force the market in one direction or another and impose is a bad word, but strongly suggest, right, a particular way of doing it. Of course, the question comes up, though. Well, what about people who are on Azure or GPC, right? Does this solution have legs enough to carry over to make it truly industry-wide, or does it become an AWS and remain an AWS-only language?
So it remains to be seen. I think a lot of this depends on how they decide to release it to the market. So far, they've only opened this for a closed beta, and they've already released specs on the language and not the language itself or any engine where you can play with the language. So it's not open source, for example. If they'll open source it, that might create a different situation. But I actually wouldn't count on that at the moment. So we're likely to see other implementations of this. We're likely to see other engines kind of complement this. And I think most importantly, we'll be seeing bridging components that allow you to leverage the different policy languages within the different clouds or different deployments as you need them. But it's still early days. So it's I think most of the interesting things are ahead of us, and I'm super excited about this. We're literally building the standards here that will guard applications for generations to come.
I don't disagree with you at all. Hey man, it's great catching up with you. We were talking a little off camera. You'll be at KubeCon up in Amsterdam.
Yes, me in person and the entire team. And I look forward to connect with you there as well. And with the rest of the audience listening to us, I'll be more than happy to catch up with all of the attendees.
For sure we will, man. It's great seeing you all. Congratulations on being a parent. It's really the best job you're ever going to have. Enjoy every second. It goes quickly, too. They grow up. But keep doing what you're doing at Permit as well, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Alan. Until next time.
Till next time. Or Wise, CEO, co-founder, Permit.io here on Techstrong. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Hello, there's a lot of challenges today with DevOps being everywhere. Data is everywhere with that data. And the challenge is how do I get that information, those measurements in the right place so that I can create metrics, analytics, and make business decisions on? One of the interesting things is that organizations today aren't really business driven or data driven like we think they are, right? A lot of organizations today barely even get to their data or know where it is to use it to create measurements. And it's a big problem today. And even for DevOps people, it's a problem. Hi, I'm Lance Knight. I am president and CEO of a company called ConnectAll. I've been involved in IT software development delivery for decades now, specifically helping organizations to be more efficient with software development and delivery, and focusing mostly on how you can use lean manufacturing principles I learned as a child as a younger man, to be more efficient. The thing is that most IT operations people, DevOps people, are just getting saturated with requests today for all types of analytics and metrics, from flow metrics, DevOps metrics, DORA metrics, improvement metrics. There's portfolio metrics, agile metrics. All of these types of knowledge and all of this data exists all over the place, and they're struggling trying to figure out, where do I get that information from? Dave here, he's a DevOps manager, and on a day-to-day basis, he's inundated with requests about, how do I make my team more important? That's what's going on. How do I get more metrics? For example, the DORA metrics can be confusing, but there's also other types of analysis and metrics that people are looking for and asking Bob from. And his boss always comes to him and says, how do I make the team more efficient? How do I measure that? And where do I get that information from is what Bob is asking, or Dave here is asking in the back of his head. So it's truly a complicated problem as teams grow and things happen, and it's this thing. It's like, where is all this data? So, and if you look across larger organizations, it even gets more complicated. So how do you understand that? How do you get to a point where you have a method or a process where you can uncover that? And here's a bigger problem with that as well. When you start looking for that data, it's in the cloud, it's in somebody's tools, it's on a spreadsheet, it's in somebody's email. And this becomes really challenging to know where to find this information so I can centralize it and do something with it. It's existing in these silos. But unlike with other types of things that you use principles like value stream management for, it could be anywhere. You don't see it. It's in the Ethernet. It sits in the computers. It's on a server somewhere in a rack, in a VM, in Azure or something. So it's hard to even know where the data is because you can't just walk out and see it. And to go along with all the things that I just talked about, there has been an explosion of tools. There are thousands of tools just in specific industries that are around software development and delivery. There are so many solutions out there today that have different niches, and data exists in all of these. So how do you know when or where or how you're using them or what they're doing for your organization? And how do you determine where the data is? What data is important? Even more than that, when? When do I capture that information in order to produce that metric? And it becomes quite a problem. So a lot of organizations have multiple deployment tools, multiple build tools. A lot of organizations have multiple agile tools and multiple portfolio tools. And, I've seen this over the decades where you need to figure out how to get that information correlated so that you can be data-driven. And it's this complication that is driving that first problem that I laid out of organizations not being able to get to be data-driven because the data is everywhere where things are getting developed, delivered, and put together. So my point of view that I wanted to give everybody today is I believe that you can use these principles that I've learned over the years to help you understand where the data is, what tools are being used, how work is happening. So you need to understand how work happens in order to know where things are going through to be efficient. And I believe you can use systems thinking and value stream management principles to uncover where the information is, where the measurements are, and where that data is to be really efficient. And the first question I always get asked is, okay, what is value stream management? What is systems thinking? And how can I use that? Well, systems thinking is really that. It's thinking about everything as a system. A system is a set of things that you do in order to develop something or have something. So you have inputs, outputs, and then things in the middle called elements. This is a very simple example of what I mean. And this is a clothes dryer. I hope everybody knows what a clothes dryer is and how you can use it to understand what systems are. A clothes dryer is a system. It's an enclosed system that does a specific thing. And there's the black box representation of that system where, you put in wet clothes, you add cold air and electricity, it goes through its phases of transition, and out comes dry clothes. And that's your cycle time for that. But more happens within this system that can have impact on that. It's more to it than that. But when you use it, this is all you understand. But inside there is more than that. There are other things. For example, there are elements in there, elements that are the heater, the drum, the electric motor, the fan. All of these things work together to tumble and dry those clothes so that you can take them out. Those different elements have different things. So just like in software development and delivery, there are elements that you use to build, run tests, and deploy against. So, when you think about where all this data is, it exists within these elements of your software development and delivery. And they have feedback loops, and there's communication and synergy happening between those so that all of this happens in the right way. And there are things that are protective, like, if the stove pipe and air can't flow, at the backside can't come out, it'll stop the dryer because it's clogged up and so on. Those are feedback loops that are happening. But when you take a look at these things, you realize, and this is, getting back to the theme of where I can pull data, information is being calculated at each one of those. That information is used for a feedback loop. That information can then be used to put into a place where I can draw and create metrics and draw analytics from it to say how many times have this failed, and use that information in order to be more effective with dry and close and looking for bottlenecks. So that's a system, and that's systems thinking. And I think, I often think of that as kind of the precursor to, value stream management and value streams. And that's where we get to talking about value stream management principles. Now, this is a value stream. I think we've all seen these over the years recently. It's a big thing recently, but they've been around for decades. And simply put, a value stream is all the steps it takes to take requests from the customer, both value added and non-value added, in order to deliver products and services. So you can see this is pretty much a standard value stream. We've seen them all before. In order to understand where to get data, though, and where to grab information for the metrics that you've been asked for, I think you need to start to use this one principle called value stream mapping and take it a little bit further. This is an example of a value stream here. Now, this is a three-tiered architecture I learned about a long time ago. This is a governance model that you can look at. And you can see that it shows both ends of this. And every organization, this is different. But in order to understand where to get data and where to find information, you have to go through an exercise like this so you can see how things are flowing. So, for example, there is an epic story, and that came from the business as a request. And it's here in intake where somebody's looking at it, understanding it, and it's going through its processes. Then all of a sudden, it moves over to approval. Information was just set up there. A measurement just happened in a solution where I may need to capture that so I can provide information or provide analytics around that. So the breakdown of work, the flow of work is all part of that as well. As I move forward to the next phase, you can see I've moved to the design phase at my portfolio level. And that actually triggered creating a new artifact in the development flow, user story. Now that user story is going to go through its moments, and data was captured because right then that epic triggered somehow for a user story to be created. And I want to capture that. I want to be able to put analytics together with it. And as I'm moving forward, it keeps uncovering itself. You can see how things are moving through your value stream here with this. And the reason why I'm showing this, and I've used this diagram quite a bit, it really does show how information is being correlated, captured, and happening in your value stream. And you have to create some type of map to show all of how this happens. That way you can start to look into there and find out where can I get information. Things like cycle time and lead time. And I'll talk a little more about that as I go on. And you can see it's still moving forward, and things are moving forward. A package was created here. It's been built, tested, released. Now it's deployed. Operation has that particular package now, whether in a microservice or whatever. And there's still information being captured. It is existing all through this method and process. And then all the way over to, defects to uncovered. Now, once you have this, now I can say, all right, now I understand what's happening, and start to figure out where to capture data from here and what to do with that data information. Now I can overlap all the tools, the solutions, the things that are used to do this. This information exists in Rally here, where I'm doing the whole portfolio stuff. That communicates with what the development's doing in Jira, and I start to figure out where to correlate this information. It comes all the way down to where builds are happening in Jenkins and tests are happening in Selenium, and I can figure out where this data is based upon the metric that I need to produce, and start to understand, because I know what the system is, I've mapped it out, and I can go find information in here and start to be more effective rather than going, oh my God, where is all this data? I have a blueprint to go find it with through my organization. And you can drill it down further in each one of those flows. So here, I can start to calculate cycle time through this flow. And I can actually bring that together with the other flows, because all of this is now visible to me where I can actually see how things are happening, where in the past I couldn't even see this. And I can see where this would happen in different tools. So a lot of data is being captured about my backlog in my Jira tickets, in Jira as well. Tests are happening in my Micro Focus testing suite. And now I can say, all right, here's where I can start to get things like defect density and all those other things exist. And then I, of course, have cycle time there. And with operations too, here's all the DevOps things that are there as well. I can look all the way out to where, I might have a list of my operational tools that are running scans and looking for vulnerabilities, or Selenium vulnerability tests in the middle. And I can try to understand what's my mean time to repair, because I know that information exists in these other solutions. And I can start to figure out where I can get and correlate this data across my whole value stream here by understanding these principles and using it to map it out. And I often talk about these are SIPOCs, but you can go all the way down to drill into the next step of those tools and say, here's those processes. And each one of those processes, data and information is being created. So what I'm trying to say is you can look at this from this way, and it'll let you know where the information you're going to need is being created in the methods and processes of developing software. Without this, you're kind of guessing at what's really going on. Now you have a clear understanding. You're able to see where it's happening, what the different things are going on within your software development system or value stream, and be able to see where I can capture data. But now I understand that. Now let's go back to the other problem about where metrics are everywhere. Everybody's coming to Dave to say, I want this metric. I want the flow metrics, door metrics. And you just have to really be able to step back and say, what's important to the organization? What do I really need to capture in order to be effective? We believe in this thing called goal question metric. And it's really simple. Goal question metric is, what's the goal I have? What do I want to try to understand? And what's the impact that I can get from understanding that goal? Bottleneck metrics are a great example. I can understand where things are being slowing me down inside my value stream, and I can figure out how I can improve flow. But until I capture that and understand that, what's the question? How do I improve flow? And the last part is, what metric do I want to look at? Maybe that would be cycle time or whatever those metrics are that people asking you for. We start to look at them through these lenses. So now that I know where the data and I can prioritize what metrics are really important, I can be more effective as a DevOps person. And again, it's quite complicated because DevOps is everywhere and tools are everywhere to work with. And the DevOps mindset of feedback loops and all of that, how many errors came back and all of those types of things. So these things kind of help you out. And these metrics then become relevant to where you can start to say, here's where I can take action on those. I know where the information is. I know why that's going to be relevant to me. And I know how I can give that information in this visualization of a metric in the right way to what customer. So the big question is, what do I end up with? Well, you can end up with something like this. This is a data flow chart. You can go and create these. There are different mapping solutions that you can go and use to lay these things out. We have one of our own, Insight Connect All, that we use this for. And that lets you tell the story of where you're going to get that data, how it all connects, and so on. And you can create these pretty easily once you understand the flow of how things are working in software development delivery. And your metrics then are a lot easier to produce as well. And you could say, okay, I know exactly how to go get that data, where it is, how to connect to it, and how to deliver that metric so that you can be more efficient in what you're doing today. And remove costs and remove waste and look for removing the non-value added activities in your organization by being data driven. And the question is, how do you get started? First, learn about systems thinking, learn about value stream management principles, not about value stream management solutions. Those are nice, right? We offer one, but it's more about understanding this age-old value stream management principles, learn lean, understand lean, and use that as part of your, I'd say, part of your weapons of helping organizations to be more efficient and making your own jobs easier as well. Create a flow map and understand how to use GQM to help organizations understand what metrics are really important to you. Thanks for listening to me today. And I really appreciate you taking the time to hear me talk about how you can be more efficient with software development delivery and how you can find data to produce those metrics when DevOps is everywhere.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me on this session. Today, I'm going to talk, about the title. The title is How Thinking DevOps Made Caesars Entertainment an Online Gaming Powerhouse. So Caesars Entertainment is now one of the big four in the online gaming space. We have 13% of the overall market. There have been, tens, if not hundreds of competitors. Only 4 have double-digit market share. When I came on board, we had no platform. Right. Well, we had a platform, but it was built in the 1990s and written in Pascal. I don't know if any of you remember the Pascal language, but it is long dead. We had 20 developers when DraftKings and FanDuel had over 200 each. And they also had a dev platform that supported their online fantasy betting operations, for, I think it had been almost a decade at that point. So many of the components necessary for doing this. We had Pascal. Right. So we had no platform and no people. So how do you become a player when you're that far behind? Right. The mission was to become a player, but obviously we were, way behind, along with hundreds of other small players that now have exited the market, and haven't made it. So how did we go from being way behind to being one of the major players in the market? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about here today. So in 2007, working as a dev manager for Orbitz, I took on a team doing our real-time analytics infrastructure. It was basically like working in the NOC. I started to notice the same pattern there that we had with our centralized database team, which was, essentially don't let anybody change anything, because if you do, things will break, and then your life is going to be hellish trying to fix it while getting blamed nonstop for everything that's gone wrong while you're trying to do that. So shortly thereafter, I heard about this new concept called DevOps, and it immediately captivated me, and I got involved. Early, I linked up with Jez Humble, and ThoughtWorks was in Chicago. So, Jez was there, a number of other people at ThoughtWorks were there thinking about DevOps, linked up with a company called DRW Trading, and we put on, I think, the first DevOps meetup group in the country. I'm not sure if it was the first, but we were meetup.com/DevOps, no need for a location hyphenation needed. It wasn't DevOps Chicago. We just got meetup.com/DevOps. We were that early. We also put on a citywide DevOps conference way back then. And we really just brought a lot of people into the community just due to the excitement. I bought DevOps.com back then because I wanted to blog on it and help advance the cause. And of course, I pushed the concept at Orbitz as well. My passion for the topic was tremendous. And I think why I focused on this so much, or what captured me the most, was this one problem and one solution. And I think it was really first articulated by the DevOps community. And the problem was local optimization. And the solution was breaking down walls in service of greater verticality and ownership. And that's really what DevOps is. And so I really knew at my core this was going to be a world changer. If this wasn't going to be a world changer, I didn't know what was going to be. So it turns out it was an industry game changer. I think history has borne that out for sure. You're at this conference. But it was also a game changer for my thinking, right? This talk isn't really about DevOps. And I know that's a funny thing to say at a DevOps conference, but this talk is really about where the DevOps mind can lead you when abstracted out. I think it applies all over the place. And I'm going to give you a place that applies, one domain. But also, I want to say at the onset, I'm going to present you something here that is going to sound neat and perfect the way everything does in talks. It ain't. It is messy. but it's also wonderful. And it's been a huge part of the formula that's allowed us to make crazy amounts of progress, coming from way behind to where we are right now. So let's fast forward a decade now. Pretend it's 2019, and I'm faced with the problem of making a dent in an industry we're way behind it. So what I applied to the problem was the result of a seed that was painted so strongly back in the aughts with this whole DevOps journey that I talked to you about. When dev was able to own their software from dev right into production and feel the pain of outage, as well as get the praise for stability, the level of developer engagement shot up. That engagement led to better ideas, to more stable and performant software, and innovation up and down the value chain. We went from seeing half a developer's brain applied to problems to somewhere approaching the whole brain. And it really comes down to this simple formula that I want to share with you guys. Engagement, how focused you are on a problem, is the product of your belief that this problem needs to be solved, or this opportunity needs to be captured. It's the product of that belief and the likelihood of the outcome. How much you feel you can affect the outcome that you want. So let me put this into something concrete. Let's take politics, for example. Many of you may feel that there are big things that need to change. From your perspective, big things need to change, and you're passionate about these changes. But you aren't out there doing anything about it because you don't feel that you have a really strong likelihood of affecting the outcome, right? There's not a great deal that you feel that you can do. So when you have, wow, I really think this needs to change, that's a 10. And I don't think I can actually make a dent in the problem, that's a 0, then your engagement is 0, i.e. you are not politically active, right? So maybe some of you are politically active. That's great. But hopefully this illustrates the point for you, right? The engagement is the product of the belief and need, and your feeling that you can affect the outcome that you want. So let's just talk about some of the components in that, right? So, and specifically, you can see these in the DevOps formula, right? So the belief and need, right? We need to do something about this. Feel the pain of an effort's failure, or feel the glory of an effort's success. So, one of the big DevOps changes was the developers should feel the bugs at 3 a.m, right? When the system crashes, they should be there dealing with that. Same thing on the success. When we have great stability, they should get some of the glory. What it used to be, right, was developers would build things, and then ops would feel the pain, right? They get woken up at 3 a.m. Ops couldn't do much about that, right? Because they're not the ones writing the code. And so, what would happen is they put up lots of walls and obstacles, right? We changed that, and we allowed the devs to feel the pain of their own poorly written software. And we'll talk a bit about how ops job changed in a bit, but that was a major shift. Now, the likelihood of outcome, the degree or influence, direct control, you kind of, you go in these, it's sort of a spectrum, right? The best thing for likelihood of outcome is that you have direct control over the thing you're trying to change, right? To solve the problem. At the worst, it's nothing, or, perhaps a vague and indirect influence, which, I think many people feel, if you go back to the political analogy there. Another one is, do you believe that you have enough ability and knowledge to solve the problem, right? That would influence your ability, your assessment of whether or not you could change the outcome. And then another one is, funny one here, the solution is your idea. If the solution is your idea, you're going to tend to be a bit more ego invested in it, and you're going to inflate its probability of changing things, therefore work harder. If it's successful, you're going to feel the glory of that. And if it's a failure, you're going to feel the pain of it. So it also, having the solution be your idea, loops right back to that belief in need. It makes you believe that you need to make this happen so that you don't feel the pain of the failure. So these are some of the things that influence the two variables in this equation. And they'll come back in a second here. So DevOps, really aligned DevOps really aligned ops folks toward creating the right rails for dev and influencing uptime and stability in that way, right? Creating the pipelines that devs would use to get things into production. This was something they could control, the monitoring, the alerting. There's so many things that they could control that we aligned ops with, creating that substrate or the environment that then dev was going to use to pipe software into production. The cloud's a great example of this too. Ops folks were excited about this, as they should be, because now they have more direct control over, influencing the goals that they have. DevOps also aligned devs with creating not just new software, but working that new software all the way into production. So this is something they now owned and could control. And they were pumped to tackle that problem, right? Because they could their modifications to software directly influenced how many times they were woken up at 3 a.m. So it's a very exciting problem for them to solve. And, these groups have tackled it. Look where we are. 50, if you've been in the industry, for 20 years, look back 15 years ago at the state of software development and at the state of how quickly we could get things into production with how many bugs. I mean, it's night and day, right? Things have changed tremendously in terms of our ability to deliver value to customers rapidly and with quality. So let's abstract that out. So what this says is that if you allow people to directly experience the problem, i.e. in this case, the pain of production crashes, and then you give them the freedom and the access to make decisions that directly affect the outcome of those things, they will be engaged, they will be creative, they will solve the problems at hand. So if we go back to our formulas here, the effective engagement is feeling the problem plus the freedom to directly act on it, right? And actually probably could phrase that as the product as well. But, in this case, it's just, that's what you're trying to put together. You want people to feel the problem and you want the freedom for them to directly act on it, right? That's what you're trying to pull together here. That's what I was trying to pull together in shaping the organization to tackle the problem that I talked about earlier. How does Caesars move faster than our competitors, right? We need greater engagement. And the way that we're going to get the greater engagement is we're going to use these DevOps principles, but now writ large in the management of a whole organization. We're going to have people feel the problem more, and we're going to give them the freedom to directly act upon it. But that there's still a problem with this, right? Because we're still in the individual place, right? And I just said we got to have the organization do this. So we need to move past kind of this individual feels the problem and has the freedom to act on it to how we get an organization to be more engaged. So the formula needs a few more parts. So let's add those parts right now. So it's feel the problem, feel the freedom to have the freedom to directly act upon it, but you also need the big picture. And because we're dealing with a large organization, we need accountability, right? If you have a whole bunch of people and they can't see the big picture, it's like cats, right? We're going to be all going in different directions. We're not going to solve a single problem because we don't know what the single problem is. So that's really important, right? It can't be just feel all these different problems, without a connection. We need to connect all of what people are feeling in service of something larger. And then because we're dealing with lots of people, we need some accountability around this, right? It's still, we're still humans and we have human nature, right? So we need some accountability to make sure that we are going in the right direction that big picture dictates. Right. So hopefully that makes sense. But we can simplify this picture just a little bit and take it down this. So the organizational engagement, there's 3 ingredients. It's the big picture, it's the freedom to directly act on it, and it's transparency. And so you'll see we kind of derive this from the formula that we had earlier. So the big picture is still the big picture. The transparency is going to take the place of feeling the problem as well as providing accountability. So that's how we're able to simplify. And then the freedom to directly act, we'll talk a little bit about how that changes in the organizational context. So let's start with big picture. The first thing is the vision or the strategy, the big picture. Everyone in an organization needs to, if you're going to follow these DevOps inspired principles, everyone should have access to the big picture, because that's the problem too, right? It's the problem statement. It's where are we going, all of us, right? So people need to have access to it. They also need to feel it, right? So you have to spend a lot of time going over this, right? So got to be attached to the big picture, which is really the strategy. Another way to say it is the strategy. Everybody should be in touch with the strategy. And at the end of the day, strategy and tactics are the same thing. Tactics are just the things you do to accomplish the strategy. But if you have if this is your strategy and these are your tactics, then one layer down, if you have some tactics here, then these tactics just became strategy, right? So it's kind of this layer, right? Put another way, your tactics are there to accomplish your strategy, even if the strategy represents tactics to accomplish yet a larger strategy. So you have an organization, and there are, there's sort of the highest level, and then you have, in our organization, we then are broken up into a number of domains, right? So you can think about betting and marketing technology and player account management. So these are these individual domains. They also have their own strategy, which essentially are tactics to accomplish the bigger strategy. And then you go down from there, right? So we first outline a broad strategy on an annual basis. The different domains, in the organization also engage in a quarterly strategic sprint. So they define their strategy that aims to propel us to the larger goals that we set out annually. We don't change the strategies mid-quarter, we stick to them. This is to say we're mostly strategic. So 70% of our work is against the strategy, 30% is just the stuff that comes up. And we spend an inordinate amount of time making sure everyone knows the strategy. And then we say it over and over again until people can really feel it. We also bring people in so they can mix with the creation of the strategy, right? So we create this big annual strategy, but it's abstract. It's just high level. There's a lot that needs to be filled in, i.e. tactics. Those tactics represent the strategy each quarter for the different domains that we're broken up into. And then as you go below that, you get into the agile process, which is going to take that stuff and decompose it into sprint by sprint commitments, right? And we go over this and we go over it and we go over it, and we're constantly talking about it so that everyone is connected from the bottom to the top on that strategy. We spend a crazy amount of time on this. So let's move on from that. And it'll kind of make sense why we spend so much time on it and why I'm harping on this big picture thing so much when you listen to the next part. So the next thing is the freedom to act directly on the problem, right? The freedom to act directly. So we don't have a lot of people telling our folks what to do. We hire adults and then we treat people like adults. If you're capable of getting a mortgage and taking care of children, then I think you're capable of acting with a great degree of autonomy at work, if provided we give you the right things, starting with the big picture. So, if you think about this, right, if the guy next to you says, hey, stay in your lane, you can debate him. And if your argument fits the strategy better, then you have a good chance of convincing him. If somebody 2 layers above you in the 5-layer hierarchy says, stay in your lane, then that person might as well be a deity. What they say is unchallengeable, almost literally. Let's take a look at this here. So this is what you get also. There's another problem with that hierarchy, right? So one is it's unchallengeable. And it kind of relates to this, which is at the top, you've got the person in a traditional hierarchy with all the autonomy, right? And they can do what they need to do, and they have all this freedom. So what are they? They are engaged. They see the problem that needs to be solved. They have the freedom to act on it. So their whole brain is engaged. Below, you have people that have to ask permission of that person above, right? But they're pretty engaged, right? Because that's the guy next to them. They see him all the time, right? Or see her all the time. And so there's a decent dialogue. And provided this person at the top's not a, autocratic dictator type personality, you're good. You build the relationship. And most of the brain is engaged at that level. But take it down a level, and just in 3 layers, you see quite a lot going away. Most organizations aren't 3 layers. 3 layers, great. You take it down another level, and like people are just, they're just not engaged, right? Because if the person 2 layers above you in the hierarchy says something, you can't tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I think that's a bad idea. You have no relationship with this person. You don't know what they're like. If you offend them, he might fire you. So you keep your mouth shut, right? And you just go along. So none of the ideas really are your ideas, because you're just trying to constrain your ideas to fit the personality of people that you've never met, or deal with the dictates that they've handed down to you that you can't challenge, right? So your ability to think and own ideas and work directly on a problem is so socially constrained that you just stop feeling like you can really directly affect anything. You don't have a lot of autonomy. You probably aren't very well connected to the strategy, because who needs strategy? Why do you have to tell everybody the strategy when you can just tell your next level managers, and they'll tell their next level managers, and they'll just tell everybody what to do? So you don't know what the strategy is, and you don't feel you have a great ability to act upon it. So naturally, you're rather disengaged. This is what you get at most organizations. We can't have this, right? Because we're behind. We have to move faster. So we need to give people the freedom to act directly. So the way that we solve for this is simply to limit the amount of authority in the company. So for 500 plus people, there are really 7 people with authority, 7 managers, in the traditional sense. The rest is all peer-based. So these managers can't possibly deliver enough direction to get things done in the old-fashioned way. So they have to rely on everybody knowing the vision, and they have to concern themselves with this as one of their primary activities. So let's move on then and talk about the third part of this, which is transparency. So transparency is the final part of the equation. We all need a nudge sometimes, and since we don't have the old manager hierarchy to rely on, right? My manager told me to do it, so I had to do it. We don't have that, right? So we use transparency to provide, that motivation. Everyone knows the strategy. And each quarter, every domain is responsible for saying what they're going to do to move the needle. Those commitments are similar to sprint commitments if we make them on a quarterly basis, and they're higher level. Those commitments are made very, very transparently. And then we report on them at the highest level and at the domain level as well. And then Agile takes care of things at the team level. So we have this incredible transparency all the way through. And, if you succeed, you're going to succeed publicly and visibly, and it's going to be fantastic. And if you fail, you're going to fail publicly and visibly. And, that's rather nerve-wracking, right? Nobody wants that. So there's a lot of motivation. There's sort of carrot and stick baked into it, but there's no person whose personality you have to deal with telling you what to do. It's on you to want to be successful, because look, it's all out in the open, and we're all sharing in this thing. So if you think getting everyone clear on the vision takes a long time and a lot of effort, this takes 5 times more. This transparency takes an incredible amount of discipline, but it's absolutely critical. If you don't have, a massive hierarchy to rely on, then you have to rely on vision and a transparent demonstration of progress if you're ever going to get to delivering results. But the benefit of this whole thing is the tremendous amount of engagement that you get, right? People understand what the problems are, and they have a much greater ability to act directly on them. And this is we've done some amazing things at Caesars. We've gotten bigger in this insanely competitive space. Many companies have spent millions and millions of dollars and now have 1% of market share and have exited the industry. I mean, there were tens, if not hundreds, of people trying to come into the space. And we've made it, even as a way come from behind kind of a story. I think we are going to build a multi-billion-dollar business. We've got the momentum, and we've done all of this in the way that I've described above. You can go back to Q4 of 2019 in our wiki and see our strategy, and you can see how well we executed on it. And you can walk that forward every quarter up until now and just see our path to getting from having no platform to, what we have today. So this isn't theoretical. It's a real world example of how DevOps thinking can influence even beyond DevOps and do some great, amazing things. I'm tremendously thankful for having, that sort of fateful day I bumped into this concept, because it has changed the trajectory of my entire career. So I hope this was interesting for all of you. I hope you've learned something. I think this kind of thinking hopefully is useful for you to think about the type of organization that you're in, or to judge the kind of organization that you ultimately want to be in. I think this stuff is a game changer, and I think you'll see more of it as the years go by. So thanks for joining, and have a good rest of your conference.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Kurt, it's a pleasure to have you again on the show. Good friend of the show.
My honor. One more time. I mean, how nice it is. Like, you haven't called, you haven't written. I am so happy to be here. The last time I was here, I was just saying it was a 24-hour show, and halfway through I decided to go ride my bike and rode it in the dark while I listened and talked on the show. It was actually fabulous. Yeah, it's cool. Like I said, thank you very, very much again.
Absolutely. It's hard to believe that it's been a year already, over a year since that last episode.
Amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, this is the second year that we've been on the air, and the second year that we've had the listeners, and it still keeps going. I don't know what keeps it going, though.
How nice is it to have the people? I mean, it's
exactly.
real. I mean, that is, having an audience and having people that are interested in politics, government, the hacking part of it. I mean,
Sure.
Just phenomenal. Phenomenal.
So speaking about phenomenal and government and hacking, let's talk about the Hannity Show. I get this message from you that you're going to be on the Hannity Show, and I listened to it, and it was really good. I heard you guys talking about the skiff and some of the stuff about Trump and the Mar-a-Lago debacle. Yeah. So why don't we recap that? Tell us about the Hannity Show and what you guys talked about.
Well, I'll get into background. I'm an attorney. I teach hacking at Quinnipiac University. I'm a retired FBI agent for 24 years. We probably considered the most dangerous lawyer in the FBI. I know that because someone's told me that. Also voted most likely person to be suicided by the federal government in this decade, which is a guarantee, right? After you hear the Hannity Show. Right. And I also have the honor of representing mostly FBI agents who come into problems with the FBI. Now, I can tell you how not to get in problems. Here's how you don't get into a problem with the FBI. Okay, you go to work, you hit the gym. Spend about 2 hours in the gym, go meet your friends, go get a cup of coffee, come back, check out the newspapers. You come, just do that go to lunch, drive around in your Buick car, listen to the good time, what they call the good time radio, and then go home. That's how you don't get into trouble in the FBI. If you do work in the FBI, you put yourself in peril. Now, it is the FBI has so many rules. They don't even make one day. Some of them don't even make sense, but they contradict each other. And I once got OPR, sent to internal investigation because I spent $6 on gas. And they couldn't figure out why I spent $6 on gas. Nobody would spend $6 unless they're putting it into their own personal car or into a red can. I'm like, well, hey, you gave me a Prius. Okay.
Which is like a little can.
Yes, and it took and I drove it around Washington for about an hour, and I filled it up. So I got subject to administrative discipline for that. I had one guy a friend who got rear-ended, and he got punished by the bureau for being in a car accident. So the bureau is very finicky. If you are part of a company that has 50 pages of rules, they may be for you. If you have 5 pages of rules, I tell people, if you have a policy for cybersecurity, it's 5 pages, 10 pages tops, but 5 pages. If you have a 50-page policy, it's unusable. Now you can have procedures, but not policy. But the FBI has 5,000 pages of policy, and they have something which they call a policy implementation guide, which is referred to as a PIG. Now, you're not allowed to call it a pig anymore. I know this because I was actually in a meeting where I referred to it as the pig, and they got chastised by the upper management. I'm like, we have acronyms for everything. Like, That's not one you don't use. And so they have 5,000 pages. The FBI whistleblower, every FBI agent, every FBI employee is a mandatory reporter. They're not whistleblowers. If an FBI agent sees misconduct, they are required to report it. If they commit misconduct, they are required to report this. Now, I've reported myself multiple times. I mean, I walked into a skiff with a phone, hung out in there for 8 hours, and then the phone rang. I'm like, oh, man. I didn't realize it. Everyone looked at me like I was a fool. I walked out with the shame, walked right over to my security guy, put the phone on his desk, said, hey, I screwed up. And they said, well, there's a form. Congratulations, Kurt. You get to fill out a form, and they call it e-pass. Filled out the form, they walk back up, bang, on the hand. Don't do it again. If you do that multiple times in a skiff, which is a special compartmentalized information area, so you can't have electronics in these skiffs, you'll be thrown out of the skiffs. You'll lose your clearance. The skiffs are where all the secrets are held. And we're talking secrets like, forget about crime. It's the president, Area 51, whatever there is out there going on, it's going to be in a skiff because it has to be. Because if you're talking about, the biggest thing is really human assets. If you're talking about what people are doing to help the FBI, you cannot let the particulars get out, because just by letting the particulars get out, the adversaries can identify them.
Right.
And so you talk about those, especially national security, in a skiff. And there are rooms in the FBI that are just sealed, and there are rooms in the government where you would never bring that type of phone. And I will tell you this: I went to a meeting before I was going overseas, and the first place I went was a skiff. And they sent me in there, and they explained to me what the rules were. Right. Then they took me to another skiff, and they gave me they put a life insurance policy in front of me, and they said this life insurance policy has no war exclusion, no suicide exclusion, and it's part of the because that's part of the job. Now none of that was secret. It's actually a company allowed this agency to be able to provide that to me because of the type of work I was doing. And they're like, look, suicide's part of the job, getting killed in war is part of the job. But what happened in the first skiff was stuff that would never leave that skiff.
Right.
And that is the stuff that you die for in war and that you kill yourself for, because if you get captured, yeah, you're done. There's a guy. We have one retired FBI agent who spent the last 20 years, 15 years in a cell in Iran. We will never get out if he's still alive. He'll never get out. But there are some secrets in the government. It's hard to believe that there are, but there are some secrets where you would not want anybody to be captured knowing those secrets.
Right.
And I think the message of here's the information. Oh, by the way, the next room is if your wife gets an extra $1 million if you cap yourself because of what happened in the previous room. That tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly.
And that actually happened.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that scares someone more. You're like, the pucker factor goes up going, wow, man, that is really wrong. That is so wrong.
In the military, they used to have the legend or the myth was they used to have Marines staying outside the skiff that had a bullet for each person in that skiff.
Yeah.
In case you get boarded or compromised. And I know with like a lot of the EP3, like Orion, some of those planes, like immediately the first thing they tell you is how to discard the information, destroy it, and what to do if you can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the policies, the particulars, the particulars of how you do this stuff is amazing. That the military personnel are really highly competent. I mean, literally, you're going to burn the building down before you have this. I have been handed hand grenades, thermite grenades, saying, if there's an issue here,
that's it.
That's it. And that's how important it is. Now, if in the FBI, the senior 7th floor of the FBI is all executives.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on, a reporter called me up, Carrie Pickett, great reporter, doesn't like corruption. And she did a story, and the FBI actually came out and said the story was about Assistant Deputy Director, I think it's Paul Abate, about the fact that he was carrying around a cell phone in another skiff in another facility for a year. And the FBI, now, if I'm in the FBI, the only time the FBI is ever going to mention me is one, if they're condemning me, and two, if they've arrested me and are seeking the death penalty, right? That's how the FBI is going to be for me.
Right.
But the FBI came out and said, "Oh, we're absolutely defending Paul Abate." When does the FBI ever come out? Usually you say, we're going to open up an inquiry to determine whether the facts are true. Not in 10 minutes tell you it's not true. Or that's a false, because how would they know? Unless Paul Abate lied to him, which in case he did, or which in case if he got the information he did. But the media people wouldn't know that. And they came out and defended someone personally, which I think is appalling, because the FBI should be about the facts. Forget about whether you like me or not. The question is whether Paul Abate did this. Now, I actually know I've been in skiffs where it's prestigious to carry for the senior executives to carry the phones in the skiff. And part of the reports to Congress was that fact that there were competitions with FBI executives to get information up to Mueller. So the executives would carry that, so they could be the first one to report on, Joe Schmo, the Arab, or Joe Schmo's a Somali who's trying to blow up the U.S. And that's why they're carrying. But it became a matter of prestige to walk around. I walk around, they shoot me. The Marine takes the bullet. They walk around, they win. But evidently he did this, and he's now the deputy director. Now, if I compromise the security of the FBI for a year, I don't care who you are. I think you should be removed.
Didn't Robert Smith do that at one point? And
they get charged.
Right.
Yes. Jail time. You do this, you go to jail. I do this, I go to jail. I'm up at ADX prison in Colorado, in a prison alone. Yes, but what happened with him? The FBI is defending him. Now, the FBI defending him, we refer to that as corrupt.
Right.
Right? Because the FBI shouldn't be defending people. So anyway, so the FBI condemned me for it. Said, how would I know? Because I only have all these people. I have one half of the FBI whistleblowers are my client, give or take. But I think the number is, we don't know how many there are, but it appears to be about half.
Wow.
So for sake of argument here. But anyway, so as soon as I come out and say this, and then the condemnation from FBI headquarters, then I get another phone call from people who say, hey, by the way, Kurt, I just want to tell you, never met you before, but I'm also an FBI agent. And I want to tell you because I'm the guy who does the sweeping of the electronic sweeping of the area, and I was responsible for the whole thing. And oh, by the way, this guy, it's not just that. The 7th floor had dozens of electronic devices inside Ray's skiff and a bait skiff presently. In fact, and then they told him not to report it. Now, if I'm the Russian, if I'm the Russians or you, and I want to own the FBI, I just sit across. They have with the
parabolic antenna.
Yes, I'm like, and it's a parabolic antenna, and you're sitting, but there's a great coffee shop that faces right across the street. I would be sitting in there with a big, huge antenna right in my briefcase. I'd sit there all day having coffee. I'd own the whole place. How to believe that doesn't happen? If we're sweeping it for countermeasures, somebody's sweeping it to find out if there's actually, information and electronics being emitted from there.
Exactly. And there's actually a box that's about the size of a small notebook called Hack RF1. And it actually picks up GSM and
I got one.
Yeah, right. So
yes!
it's really easy to do that, especially like in a location like I'm at where the FBI is directly line of sight out my window.
Does it work?
It works.
Oh, yeah.
I heard it works.
Wait. Before it's Hack RF, right?
Hack RF.
That's okay. Now, what's the company that makes that? It's Hack 5 is where I got. They sell it. Yeah, they Hack 5 is great, but there's a company it's a guy's name that makes it. It's great because it emulates or able to receive from every frequency, right?
Yep, and there's Evil GSM 2 that actually helps you collect MZ information regarding each endpoint that's connecting to that tower. So it's a lot of information, a lot of data.
Now, did the RF, the Hack or the RF, did that cost you $15,000 or $20,000?
No, not at all. You could probably build one for free.
Yeah. Or pay what, $200 if that? I mean, it's
$200, $300, yeah.
Very difficult to use too, right?
Right.
Okay, so this is trivial, right? This is a trivial hack to actually take.
Very trivial, yeah.
Very trivial. I mean, it's not even worth. It's so bad that they would leak that type of material, that type of information outside. That just for that alone, Paula Bate should step down.
Right.
Let's be a man about it. He should step down. I mean, if I was there, that's what I would do because I violated the rules. I didn't have the FBI media telling me I did, protecting me. But what does that say for everyone else? So anyway? So that was the skiff issue. Is the fact that the most secret information and in the world.
Mm-hmm.
From the most and let's put it this way: when you look at the FBI, right now the FBI is the most powerful law enforcement agency in the known universe,
and the most corrupt.
Well, there's some police departments that are out there, but that's for the power it has. It shouldn't be corrupt at all. It's too valuable. This stuff is too valuable to be corrupted one bit. Now, when I was over in Iraq. In 2009, General Petraeus was there. It was a surge, 2008 and 9. And they decided they were going to do quantity first get law enforcement. We'll get quantity first, quality second. Bring in make the quantity and find the officers and then make them into great officers. But that doesn't work.
Right.
You have to have the quality first and build the core. Then you have the quantity because one corrupt guy will hurt a department. 2 corrupt guys will hurt a department. 5 corrupt police officers or FBI agents will destroy a department. You don't have to look at the people hands. And we have people in jail that have suffered or we have suffered the wrath of these guys, just one of them. And now you have and I'm not sure which is worse when you have a guy like Hansen,
Robert Hansen.
Yeah, who sold stuff to the spies, or you have these knuckleheads who are giving it away for free.
Well, and the funny thing, too, you talk about the skiffs and how this is happening on the 7th floor. For those of you who don't know, after Robert Hansen, the FBI created a SOC within the FBI headquarters at the Hoover Building.
Yes.
So I can't remember if it's like the fifth floor
where
they have the SOC. And so they monitor all of the FBI headquarters networks and all the assets there in the building. And this is occurring 2 floors up from the SOC.
I've never heard of the SOC. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Never heard of it. Don't know anything about it.
Yep.
Can't. Okay. And here's the thing: you have a bunch of very dedicated people that will actually that will do whatever it takes to protect the material.
Yeah.
This is that. I mean, you can't understate how important this is, because there's somebody who is providing information. Say they're in Uganda and they're providing information. That information gets back to Uganda that this guy is providing it. They're going to kill him right away. Right? That they're dead. Any country, if you have spies, they're going to kill them. That's what they do to spies, except for the U.S.
Or make them jump out of windows at resorts.
Yeah, I know. It's, there's a lot of people who die in hotel rooms. I mean, it's just one of those. Even D.C., there's a fair amount of people who die in hotel rooms.
Yeah, like Wormwood. I think that was a great documentary series that I watched where the CIA was messing with LSD and tossed that dude out the window in New York.
Yeah. If it is it's those are all secrets.
Yeah,
I can't believe that the CIA would actually ever do that. They're just the good people.
They're job hazards,
Look, you have to protect your secrets.
Right.
It costs a lot of money and a lot of treasure, a lot of lives to be able to obtain those secrets.
And not to mention, like, the Hoover Building is right down the street from Embassy Row.
Yes.
And people who don't know D.C., Embassy Row is where all the foreign embassies in the U.S. house their people. And this is right down the street from the Hoover Building.
It's not. Well, I mean, I just like the fact that I can't remember what the coffee shop is. It's not Starbucks. It's yellow. But it's, you could literally sit there and look up at the director's suite area and have coffee all day.
Yeah.
And honestly, you'll have FBI agents talking shop in that coffee shop, but you can stick that antenna right there. No one's going to do anything as long as you're buying coffee, right. and just suck it up. I mean, it's nuts.
And the antennas that we use are not large antennas. The antenna that I use for pen tests and red teaming literally fits in a backpack.
Yes.
And I can walk by a building and pick up every single GSM signal out of that building, out of a skyscraper, with just a backpack.
How I mean, all someone would have to do. I mean, imagine how easy it is to actually get someone to work in that store and just and then they have a garage. They have a parking garage right there. They could drop. I mean, you could make anything, drop it right out front, it off on the side, something's discreet. That RF is probably about that big.
Yeah,
5 inches by 4 inches.
5 inches by 4. Yeah.
Hook up an antenna, boom, you're in business. And and all of a sudden you're collecting all the secret data and turning on a cell phone speaker. Little tricky, but all you have to they have this thing called the internet.
Yeah,
you can
watch my YouTube channel and learn how to hack Androids remotely.
Look, damn. Okay, there we are. So. So the idea that they would do this, but no one said they've stopped. Now, Paul Abate also had another. What I love. Paul Abate was from New York, so he worked in New York with me, and people would say he's arrogant. People would say a lot of different things, all of which may or may not be true. He clearly worked in New York. I believe this. I believe the information about him carrying the cell phone around because I've seen it. Right. I've seen that from a bunch of people, and that's consistent with how executives in the FBI are. But the one that really blew me away was the fact that one of the protected disclosures comes in and says, "Hey, by the way, Paul Abate has a girlfriend, and that girlfriend was in the Office of General Counsel." Now, this isn't me. This is actually a protected disclosure that went to Congress.
Right.
So this is in Congress. Had a girlfriend. She was about to get fired because she was not that good at her job. Now, you can get fired in the FBI by being very good at your job. So just because someone says you're getting fired does not mean you're going to have been you're going to have done anything wrong. But but all of a sudden, she stopped getting the process of getting fired because she started dating Paul LeBate, and then she got shipped off. And then the rumor was, and this is what the protective disclosure said, was she got a free trip to a university to go to law school.
Wow.
On the government's dime. Now, I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's what this agent or this employee was saying was, hey, by the way, now, when you're in the office of general counsel, anyone who knows this has a lot of access to information. So, but then the rumor came out that, hey, she's over in, I think, the Detroit or Chicago office. And the protected disclosure came out. So about a week ago, I got a phone call from another one of my friends who's over in Chicago. Said, Kurt, what you did to that poor lady was terrible. I'm like, why? She goes, because she never once came to our building to work where she's supposed to be working. He goes, but she had to run back and work now. But she's actually walking around the parking lot because she doesn't know where to go. Oh my God. She goes, I blame this on you. So if you have a program where you could send someone for a master's degree, you give that to your most exceptional person.
Right.
You give it to the people that are forget about exceptional, hardworking. Give it to the hardworking person that spent 19 years doing some job that no one else wants to do and doing that, whatever it is. And really, if you are sweeping a floor in a skiff, you have all of the same security clearances as the person that's running the army.
That's reading the information, yeah.
Yeah, that is this. Everyone who's in there is trusted, but give it to that person. Let them go to school, even if they're sweeping the floor or what. And it's still, that's an important job, sweep the floor. But go on a year sabbatical.
Right.
The idea now the person is walking around trying to find a place to sit and work because someone disclosed this is just too funny.
Yeah.
And again, we refer to that in the FBI as corruption.
Absolutely.
That's sad. That's that idea. If that's true, and again, these are now why I said that this was a protected disclosure. Mm-hmm. The whistle in the FBI, there's a protected disclosure, and it's different than in the real world. Because in the real world, if you are a whistleblower for a corporation, cha-ching, cha-ching, you bring in money. That's why people do it. For the IRS, they bring in money.
Right.
FBI agents, the only thing they get by reporting wrongdoing and going to a whistleblower is they get to keep their job. That's all it does.
And put on a list, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, you're done. You're done. Your career's over. Yeah. But the whistleblower corp provides no compensation really other than getting your job. So keeping it. So I represent people in that court. Now, before me, and I went to that court, there were only 4 people in FBI history who won, and none of them stayed in the job.
Why would you want to, though? Because you'd be walking around with a target on your back, right?
To destroy the place from within. I mean, to change it. To change it for the better. To change it for the better. Right. Come on, those are the people you don't want to leave.
That's very true, though.
That's true. If you want, because it's in the FBI, it's okay to make mistakes. You just have to admit you made a mistake and be accountable, and then you should move on, because everyone makes mistakes, and you don't want to do all this work to get somebody, have them make a mistake, and then say, well, you're out. But the surest way, if you make a mistake, say sexual harassment, you're not getting fired. If you report someone for sexual harassment, you're getting fired.
Exactly. Which
is crazy. So anyway, okay, so that's what we were talking about on Hannity, going on about the difficulty with the whistleblowers and how many there are and stuff. It was quite interesting. I thought. I enjoyed doing it.
It was a really good interview too, because thinking back to with my interaction with the FBI and how they deal with informants and meetings and stuff like that. It brought up a lot of questions for me, because it was I was never checked at any of our meetings if I was carrying a cell phone, if I was recording anything. The agents never asked me. And part of me is well, maybe they already knew, maybe they had somebody in a parking lot. But no, common sense says that they were probably just lax on that. And I could have carried any kind of recording device I wanted to. They wouldn't have known.
That's right. Well, here's the thing. First of all, if you're carrying a recording device, that would mean that you're trying to catch them for doing something wrong. And hopefully they're not doing anything wrong. Hopefully they may have a recording device.
Right.
But I would actually, if someone told me, I've had people for informant meetings, have people bring guns, people bring recording devices. I'm like, I'm not going to do anything wrong. You want to record it? Fine. I said, more importantly, as looking at an informant, and really, there are so many people who are human sources for the FBI that are trusted by the FBI, who may have done something wrong, maybe they haven't, maybe they're doing it for money, but they provide a huge asset to the FBI, and they should be treated with respect and with dignity and respect. And if you can't if you don't trust your source, you probably shouldn't have.
How good is that source? Yeah.
Yeah. I would. I mean, funny. My sources were my sources were people that I'm sure they would consider me a friend. And to the extent that I could consider them a friend, I would. I had one guy who got arrested. He was outside of some event, like it was a church event, and the police officers were letting all the executives from one company in and leaving everyone aside. So they're treating one company differently. Right. And he reported this. He stopped the police officer, said, "That's corrupt. You let everyone in," and the cops arrested him on the spot. And and then he called me up. I'm like, I mean, I can help you out, but that would look very strange considering the value of what you're helping us out. And he goes, "But I'm guilty of sin." I'm like, "I know that, but I'll let you choose. What would you rather do? Have an FBI agent come in and compromise you, or work this out and we'll figure something out later on?"
Right.
And what was funny about that was he actually said, you're right. So he took a plea, which I told him not to. I mean, I can't tell him. I said, like, jury trial, son.
Right.
That's what jury trial is. But he's like, "I don't want to deal with that. Take a plea." And then C just came out like 3 months later and had his record expunged.
Wow.
Now, do you know the expungements happen so quickly, or can happen so quickly, that people may not even have records. So I see people walk around for 20 years with a record. I'm like, go get an expungement and get an expungement, because why are you being plagued by something you did? I mean, I've done so many things wrong in my life, I can't count them. And why would you be plagued with, just human nature?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, I screwed that up again. It's only 3 times. And I mean, I'm not allowed to go into one country because I'm PNG, persona non grata. They told me if I come back, I can expect to have irons around my wrists and ankles.
Wow.
Because I'm protecting U.S. interests, not other countries' interests.
Right.
And what I did, I got away with, and they said, "You win this time." And I apologized. They said, they said, "No, we get it, but understand what the rules of the game are. Next time you won't have diplomatic immunity. Next time you're going to be locked up here." Okay, thank you. Thanked them profusely, actually, and because they could have locked me up and I'd have to get out. And nobody really wants to be in those jails in Middle East, Africa. No, bad.
Or even Mexico.
Right. I just had a friend of mine who was in a psych ward in Mexico. I like, you know what it takes to get into a psych ward in Mexico?
What did you do?
He went on a bender. I mean, I was like, "Dude, what kind of bender was that?" He's like, "I don't know." Well, that would explain why you're in the psych ward. Okay, so
right.
So where were we? But it's damn it, I lost track my thought here of where we're going with this.
Corruption and
it's corrupt. I mean, no, that wasn't what we talked about. What we're talking about is the value of human sources.
Yeah.
But we're also in that. What I just told you, I think is more important, was that I don't care if people do something wrong, you're accountable and you move on. And that even if somebody has been arrested, and they're helping us out, they're the same type of source as the guy who's an executive who's helping us out. There should be no difference in trust. If you can't trust your source, you shouldn't have your source. And this was coming into one of the issues I talked on Hannity about. Was there was a protected disclosure that related to a drug transaction out of Newark. And and before I talk about the drug transaction on Newark, I got to talk about the rapist. And there was another protected disclosure who was talking about a guy who was harassing people, harassing women, sexual harassment, so much in the Newark office that he had a nickname of the rapist.
That's crazy.
Now I look at that guy is gone.
Right.
If I have one sexual harassment complaint I would pull that person, and I have done this, and said, you're just never going to do this again, right? That's, first of all, you will never do this again. Secondly, if you do it again, you'll be out of my unit immediately. And then what your performance report will look like all it will talk about is why you're out of that unit.
Right.
That's how it should. You can end sexual harassment in the bureau in a second if you equate the misconduct with the performance. And the FBI actually separates the two. So executives who have multiple allegations of misconduct, sexual harassment, are never judged on that for performance.
And just for the record, agents have what level of clearance when they become an FBI agent?
Mandatory. It's
secret, right?
No. Everyone has to be able to become have top secret.
Yes, right.
Yes. Now you only get to keep the clearance that you need,
right? And
so all FBI facilities are at a secret level,
right?
So if you need to go up to a SCIF and TS SCIF, they'll give it
cleared. Yeah.
But like that, you're cleared like that. But that means the scrutiny increases tremendously, and you are technically under scrutiny. I'm under scrutiny,
right?
The executives, Ray and Abate, well,
see, that's why I bring this up, because these people that we're talking about, like the sexual harassment, the rapists, all this stuff, right? These are guys who have already gone through a security clearance, SF-86, they're secret and above, at least.
And how easy are they to compromise?
Yeah.
Blackmail. Done. Now, I didn't learn about the rapist because of someone telling me this initially. I actually disclosed it to Congress, and when I have to, in order for a protected disclosure for my client to be proper, I have to go to a congressman. Now, the gentleman Gomer, who was doing the interview, was actually a congressman. So the information I was providing to a congressman, and also 2.4 million people, is that how many people watch Hannity every day or something like that? Yeah. That's actually a legal protected disclosure.
Right.
Now, the FBI probably says, wait a second, you did it on a radio show, but I never talked to the congressman in person other than on a radio show. So I have to make my protected disclosures. That's how you do it.
Exactly.
Coincidentally, how did that work out? So I think the message there to why I've missed, the Representative Gomer is a great guy. I've heard greats about. I've never talked to him. That before that, and I think the message there is to the FBI that we wanted to test the information that you're going to see when the hearings come up next month or starting next month,
right?
By having one person talk about them, which was me.
Hello and welcome to Digital Transformation. Day 2 is now. I'm your host, Mike Vizard, and we have pulled together no less than three digital transformation officers to talk about what's coming in the year of 2023. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. We have Paulo Hovera from Pure Storage.
Hi, good morning.
We have Sanjeev Sahu from Ingram Micro.
Good morning, everyone.
And finally, Nick Parada from Harman.
Good morning.
Excellent. Let's just jump into this, but I feel like in my memory, this is the year that has the most amount of uncertainty in it. So if you guys don't mind, I'd appreciate it if first you would kind of give your sense of 2023 and then tell us a little bit about the company you work for at the same time. Paulo, let's start with you.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. So I'm Paolo Ibarra, I'm the Chief Digital Transformation Officer for Pure Storage. And Pure Storage is a leader in all-flash storage for companies worldwide. And we help companies with their storage needs in their data centers, in the cloud, as well as in the hybrid environment. Now, coming to your questions on 2023, yeah, 2023 is definitely is a year with a lot of uncertainties. You know, the macroeconomic situations, the climate situation, wars are no, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty there. But at the same time, there are also a lot of opportunities. No, in uncertain environments, from our perspective, is always the case, and this is what we are seeing in the market at the moment. There is also opportunities to highlight your separation to your competitors, right? Whether you are providing a better technology in terms of performance, in terms of cost, or in terms of energy consumption reductions, like is the case for us. These are the times where kind of companies that are paying more attention to the return on their investments, the value that they're getting from the project that they invest in. These are the times where this separation becomes a lot more important. And therefore, we are very bullish, we are very optimistic that in times of uncertainty, in terms of disruption, there is also an opportunity to gain market shares, to gain and to differentiate from your competitors. Internally, however, there's also puts a lot of pressures on organization like mine, like I assume Nick and Sanjeev, and I would love to hear their perspective as well. But when you talk about digital transformations, this is about changing the way the company does business. In an uncertain environment, operational efficiency, agility, the ability to respond very, very quickly to a changing environment, to changing customer needs is very important. And so this is going to be a very challenging year for all digital transformation officers, and at the same time, an exciting year because it's showtime for all of us.
All right. Sanjeev, what's your crystal ball telling you for the coming year?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's no secret that 2023 is going to be a tough year, challenging year, and we can only predict and hedge how good or bad it's going to be because, but frankly, things are changing every day. The macro situation, everything is changing. But I think as a company, as Ingram Micro, we are one of the largest technology distributors. We are the business behind one of the bigger technology brands, operating at $54 billion revenue scale in 59 countries operations and more than 170,000 customers. So we have a larger footprint across the globe. And we do think that the channel will always be important to support the economic, and the growth of the whole world. But at the same time, we cannot predict the volumes. So there will be some softening of the volumes. There is softening of supply chains. But what we are doing is, instead of hedging, we are getting prepared, and making sure that the best we can do to service our customers, listening to the customers, what their needs are, and being ready. Now, this also focuses the switch. It's like, instead of figuring it out the investments in technology, I think the focus that you will see switching is more towards the value coming out of technology, because we got to be all very prudent in where the investments are going. And the same is in Ingram Micro as well. It was, in my 2 cents, you'll see everywhere that there's a lot of talk about how much spend in tech and digital. I think it should be more about how much value are we getting, because this is the year everybody will need more value. Everybody will see that the investment that you are making in digital technology, is it really generating an operating income? Is it giving you the leverage? True automation, is it really giving you the revenue coming in? And that's where I think it's important for us to focus on this year.
All right, thanks. And Nick, what are you saying?
Well, Mike, thanks again for the invite. What I would say is it's going to continue to be business as unusual, no question. As I look at our challenges internally, as well as in talking with customers, and I couldn't agree more with Sanjeev. what we're really focused on is driving value creation through technology. So if I step back, Harman is a Samsung company. We're a wholly owned subsidiary, and we have 30,000 employees around the world that have a passion and a purpose to deliver immersive experiences, both in the automotive space and in the lifestyle consumer audio space, but also in the technology space. What people may be aware of is we've taken a design-led approach, build sophisticated software using artificial intelligence and analytics and cloud and cyber. We embed that in hardware, including the car and in concert venues and also smart audio products. And then we give a really immersive, enriching experience to our end consumers. What's well known is, of course, our automotive and audio brands, Mark Levinson, JBL, Harman Kardon, Bang & Olufsen. What's lesser known is we also have a business that I run called Digital Transformation Solutions. So we take all of that knowledge and experience in our automotive and consumer audio products, and we do the same for customers in the industrial, healthcare, and communication space. And so, what we're preparing for both internally as the Chief Digital Information Officer as well as externally is making sure that we're using those design-led experiences, the sophistication that we have in software that's embedded in hardware, and really driving value creation and better outcomes for customers. And so, the outlook for 23, as I mentioned, is business as unusual, continued volatility in the supply chain, continued geopolitical challenges and risks, continued cyber threats, and an ever-growing complex landscape, and also the continued competitive talent marketplace where we've got to compete for talent and make sure that we become the employer of choice through a fantastic culture and keeping that culture connected across the company. When I look at the technology that we're using to navigate all of these uncertainties, we'll continue to make important investments on areas where we want to grow, whether that's in the commerce space or the artificial intelligence and intelligence and predictability space, where we're really using our large data sets across the company and making sure that we're using it in a way to drive better demand forecasting, inventory optimization, even combat cyber threats through artificial means. All those are what will help us navigate an ever-growing uncertainty in the marketplace.
All right, thanks for that. Sanjeev, what is your sense of, are people post-COVID, if I think back in that era, they were, let's throw everything and we can do at digital transformation, and we had 1 million projects. Do you think people are doubling down on those projects, or are they trying to pick the 3 or 4 or 5 maybe that are really going to make a difference and focusing their efforts on a smaller number of projects that they hope deliver more value?
That's a great question, Mike. We have to think about digital transformation a little bit differently. Many times we think digital transformation is, okay, we modernize our applications to cloud, or we're building something on AI, or working on some data. I mean, it sounds great, but I go back to the real point about where is the value in my books in the company. So we have to start with the customer first. Okay, focus on the customer experience and the customer journey, and that will tell you the art of possible. Then operationally figure out what is the art of feasible. Like, okay, from these use cases in these initiatives, which actually has the highest return, highest value, and a prioritization that we have to do. Because there's always temptation to do my 1,000 things, but you have to focus with the lens of a chief value officer. Forget digital officer. I think everybody should be a chief value officer, about where is my value and what is my investment, and how quickly we can actually get to that value. Once we do that prioritization, then in the background, we also have to keep our architecture ready. For example, the time to market is very important. If a legacy application is prohibiting you to go faster, you have to do both. You have to keep on performing while you transform, right? So there is some investments required to constantly improve your legacy, which is required, but you have to untangle value quickly for your customers, your business do that. So I think what you see, my thought process is figure out the 3 or 4 initiatives that truly drive the incremental revenue, the incremental operating income, and which really in conjunction with the business and the operational leaders. And it has to be done in tandem. Like many times we think we do the transformation, build the technology, and wait for adoption by the operations. It really doesn't work. So we introduced a concept called DG Ops, where the operations group and the technology group is in my area as well, where we focus on metrics. Every single measure is not about the next application moving to cloud, but about the next dollar that you're bringing in terms of operating income and prioritizing them. So it's all prioritized, Mike, with the focus of value creation and the results. And I think that's where will get us there, because otherwise we always do modernization, enterprise, digital transformation, but we have to really prioritize with the focus with value.
All right, Paulo, do you agree with that? Do you see something different, or do we just need
No,
more?
I definitely couldn't agree more than on that. I think it's not very, very important to focus on value, or no, we call it business outcomes in our case. Now, when you talk about digital transformation, what digital transformation really are, in my mind, there are 2 aspects to it. One of it is continue to optimize your existing process, your existing businesses, and that is about modernizing your infrastructure, improving things. And there is a lot of value that can be unlocked. Right, that ties to operational improvements, continuous improvements, lean processing, Six Sigma, and all of that, where you focus on what you do every day and you just improve it relentlessly, so that you can unlock further value from what you do. The second aspect of digital transformation is perhaps not the most glamorous, that is adding revenue, creating new products, unlocking new markets, and leveraging really technologies to do that. And I think digital transformation is both. In the COVID era, going back to your question, I think in the COVID era there was initially kind of a certain drive to survive in many ways. Right, there was digital technologies were seen as a way to continue to operate in an environment where people couldn't be physically together. But then that initial wave has unlocked a lot of creative thinking of new business model, new ways of doing things, and there is perhaps been a bit of a glutton of that. And I think that what we are seeing is a bit of a going back to a balance between these two imperative of continuously to optimize your processes, and then at the same time unlocking new markets and unlocking new revenues, but always with the business value, using Sanjay's terms, of the business outcome in mind. Business value, business outcome is not necessarily, in my mind, always translated into a dollar, or at least not translated directly into the extra dollars of revenue. It could be another metrics. It could be customer satisfaction. It could be reductions of frustrations for employees. It could be many things, but it's always a business outcome. It's never just, hey, I executed this project, I delivered these new capabilities, I moved this application from on-premises to the cloud. That is not good enough. It always has to be related to a specific business outcome.
Nick, Paulo kind of outlined a 2-tier approach, and I want to get your sense of not only just how to maybe apply more discipline, but while we're at it, so much of what you do see that's called digital transformation is somebody stuck a mobile device in front of a paper-based process and called it good. Do we lack a certain amount of imagination, or is it just simply that, the projects that are really going to make a major difference, that have a cultural impact on the company, or just take more time to implement, and 2-tier is a good idea? What's your thought?
So from my perspective, there's still no shortage of imagination. There's endless number of great ideas. The reality, though, is to be able to go from concept to creation to commercialization is still, for many companies, a struggle. And so having that discipline, having that experience on how you take a good idea and make money with it is still a very difficult process. So I think part of it is the way that you approach that process. So using an agile approach and using minimum viable products, doing proof of concepts, doing all the things that help you get to a point of, you know, the concept to the creation, and using tool chains to do that. You know, again, when we look at the low code, no code capabilities that many companies are instituting now, like we are, reducing that speed of innovation cycle is extremely valuable and important. And then determining whether you want to persevere through that process or pivot to something important. Again, it takes a lot of discipline and a really clear methodology in how you do that. But there's no shortage of great ideas. I think it's a matter of prioritization as well, having a really robust demand management process and making sure that everyone's lined up and understands what the end goal looks like, and then rallying around that, making sure you have the right resources with competency, the right support across the company, and you're engaging the customers early on in that process is extremely important. Paulo pointed out a really good, kind of approach on making sure your run is optimized so that you are getting the most value out of your operations and your infrastructure and your cloud and your compute and your endpoints. But taking some of that optimization and reinvesting it into the grow spaces around commerce platforms, and again, including really unique experiences. If you go to our jbl.com site, you can see what a unique experience on a commerce platform might look like, where you have really strong virtual personal assistants, where you have the ability to personalize the products. But providing a level of experience is really important with customers. But listening to your consumer, both internally and externally, on what they're looking for and how quickly to get there is really important. But the growth side of things, again, we see a significant amount of investment, especially around artificial intelligence analytics. Really allowing the machine learning and the algorithms to help us drive better insights around customer preferences, behaviors, and designing a continuous improvement and design process. So taking what we're hearing around our products in the consumer and automotive spaces through that consumer, continuous improvement, continuous design process, incorporating it back into the life cycle of the product is extremely important. So again, I think you'll continue to see significant demand around all things digital, but having a really disciplined process and making sure you're not losing sight of what matters, which is value creation and a unique experience and the best outcomes for customers is something that is absolutely critical if you want to continue to grow your business.
All right. Sanjeev, we kind of live maybe in the post-COVID era, maybe not, because we're still seeing the next wave come. How has COVID kind of changed your mindset about how you think about digital transformation? And we have people who are remote part of the time, all of the time. Some are in the office, but very few are in there full time. So what's your sense of how should digital transformation officers think about COVID these days?
Yeah, there are a few lessons from COVID, Mike, on digital transformation. In COVID, we did 10 years of transformation in 2 years. Imagine if COVID didn't happen, we need to have a program, everybody should work from home, security, and there will be lots of questions about how we cannot do it versus how we can do it. So one thing COVID has taught us is to have more focus on the art of possible versus focus on the art of impossible, which is very important for digital transformation. Because when you are changing a company or transformation culture, you'll have a lot of people who will say, no, this is not going to work. This is how we have done it for many times. So, but COVID has shown the doors of what is possible when there is actually a need and there is no other alternative. So that's a big lesson, I think. That, and what is also taught is showed the importance of technology readiness infrastructure with the eyes of business, and it has actually paved the way for more digital enablement in the company. Everybody realizes that we have to be up to this mark, to be operationally successful, because anything can happen anytime. Coming back to the workforce and hybrid, I mean, obviously we all live in a hybrid world, but I think we still boil down to, instead of measuring what we are delivering, how many hours you're working, the focus, if the focus is more on the value creation, the results, the bias for results, then what you will not actually be measuring about, how is the engagement, what are they working. So at least what we focus, is we have, if you look at your design thinking and PI planning, we have measurable deliverables tied to the value. And every quarter, every 2 weeks, we are doing releases now every week, moving fast, and what happens there is that it really doesn't matter how we have a distributed workforce, people are all over the world. It has actually made it easier now to all combine together because we focus on measurable metrics and value. It has pushed us to be much more metrics and results driven versus who is there. So you don't have to always be together and face time to do the work. Have a agile workforce. I'm going to example. I was doing one-on-one with one of my direct reports. Instead of facing, I said, okay, send me all your questions. And I'm writing in teams. One, this question. I said, yes. Two, no. Three. So it's agile collaboration. It has taught us. And what you thought before, we have now much more precise and crisp. So my take, Mike, is that the switch is more on actionable deliverables, measuring through metrics and analytics versus where the workforce is. That we have learned right now.
All right, Paulo, going into 2023, for a lot of folks who are watching this who are aspiring digital transformation officers, what do you know now that you kind of wish you knew before you took this job?
I think it's not the focus on the need for driving value. I think is the things that I know now, and perhaps I knew it before, but I think is the coming into this year of as we said, of uncertainties. I think that we really need to drive a lot more discipline and a lot more a lot more selective and disciplined in the way we choose to tackle problems. In prior years, both kind of prior to the pandemic or kind of coming out of the pandemic, as there were a lot of resources, a lot of needs, and kind of we were try to do everything at the same time. And it's not just a matter of kind of not diminishing resources or perhaps external constraints. It's a matter of how fast can an organization absorb the change. And so that is one of the things that is, to me, has been striking in the past year. That is, there is a lot of different needs in a lot of different directions. All of them, if you look at them individually, are a top priority, a top needs, and something that should be done immediately, but cannot be executed all at the same time. And so it's not the need of identifying what are the top areas of investment, the top priorities, the most impactful areas of investment is of paramount importance, and I think is going to become increasingly important in coming years. And that goes back to the principle of discipline that we discussed before.
All right, Nick, we got 2 minutes. I'm going to give you the parting word. What's your best advice to your digital transformation officer? Should I get more about technology, or should I just find a good therapist? What's your thought?
I would say first is remain adaptable and resilient. Things will continue to change, and your ability to adapt to those circumstances are incredibly important. The second is surround yourself with really great talent. You won't be able to do it all on your own, and the best assurance of success is by surrounding yourselves with people that you can rely on and trust. The third, I would say, is deliver. You earn the right to do more, be strategic, be a partner, be at the table and have a voice because of your delivery. So say do means everything. And then the last piece is culture. Culture matters. It's the biggest differentiator. So making sure that what you think and what you say and what you do with respect to how you deliver on the culture of commitments and values that the company has is incredibly important. So if your culture is teamwork and excellence and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a commitment to deliver unique experiences for customers, then you need to live that every day. And so I think those are the things that I would advise to those that continue to aspire to be on a career path to be a CDIO.
All right, folks, you heard it here. It's just like the theme, stand and deliver. I want to thank our panelists today for sharing their knowledge and insights. Guys, that was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, I want to thank you all for watching this episode. And of course, you'll be able to find this and everything else from today's event on Strong Group's website. Thank you all and have a great day.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Kit Merker, as Chief Growth Officer for Noble 9. They just raised an additional $15.8 million in funding, and we're going to talk about what the plan is for that, along with observability and SLOs. Kit, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
So you guys, this is not the first funding you guys have raised. And I guess the question that immediately comes up is, I guess after everybody gets a virtual beer, what do you plan to do and what comes next?
Yeah, we've been around since 2019 and we raised some funding before from Battery and CRV and some other investors, which has been great. I think what's different for us now is we've really hit our stride in terms of customer adoption. And so everything that we're doing now in terms of growing the business to help customers and help them standardize on SLOs. We've added ServiceNow and Cisco, both Cisco investments as investors in Noble 9. And so the focus for us is continue to build the best SLO product we can, make sure we support our customers and make sure that they're getting the best uptime and service and everything else. And then continue to educate the market about SLOs and continue to invest in different open source and community projects to make sure that people know how to use SLOs and how to make service level objectives and how they can impact the reliability and velocity of their organization. So, yeah.
Now, you guys have been talking about SLOs, otherwise known as service level objectives, but the concept, at least, has been around since, I don't know, maybe the first mainframe. But your approach is SLO is code, essentially, and we're trying to make all this programmable. So can you explain what the difference is for the uninitiated?
Yeah, I mean, all enterprise software is replacing a spreadsheet. So let's start from that. If you think about an SLO, the concept is kind of as old as the dawn of services, right? If you walk into a restaurant, there's a certain amount of time it's acceptable that they come up and offer you a table, or else you leave the restaurant. And this same concept applies to software services. If you're using, a mobile tech upload, you're streaming a video, you're trying to maybe buy, a ticket to a concert, there's some amount of frustration that is okay, a very small amount usually. And then beyond that point, people start to get pretty upset. Maybe they move off your service, et cetera. They don't expect perfection. I think this is really the key idea that SLOs, modern SLOs are harnessing, is that people will accept a small amount of error and they will hit refresh. And also, if you have services that are built to be resilient, they can also retry to connect to an API or a database, et cetera. So with this kind of insight, you're right. The key is to build automated SLOs. In fact, I think that's really the better way to think about what Noble 9 is an automated SLO platform. Usually, I think the traditional way people look at this is they'll build an SLA, they'll put it in a contract, they'll agree, okay, our service is going to be up 99.9% of the time. The details of how that will be measured is somewhat fuzzy, with some special exclusions and things like that. It's looked at manually using spreadsheets and reports. In contrast to the modern way that SLOs are done at companies like Google and others that have adopted it and the way that Noble 9 works, the SLOs are clearly defined in code. We have a standard called OpenSLO we built with industry leaders like Red Hat, Dynatrace, Sumo Logic, and GitLab that are all contributors to OpenSLO. It's checked in as part of your GitOps process. There's no arguing over how the SLO is defined. And then the second piece is we define different conditions. Some people might be familiar with error budgets, but basically the idea that you set thresholds that can trigger automation. So, imagine that instead of having to look at the report in real time, you can anticipate that an SLO will be violated if the conditions continue, and you could trigger an automated runbook, some sort of automation to maybe scale up the service or roll back a release. You could Slack the team, you could send an email, you could kick off a ticket in a ServiceNow or in Atlassian Jira, or you could fire off a pager to the team. And so that choice based on these different thresholds and rules, but it's all grounded in trying to understand user expectations. How much failure will they tolerate, and how much are you willing to accept from the business in order to run efficiently while also offering excellent customer service. And that's the name of the game, not striving for perfection, but to have clearly defined acceptable failure in the system.
Is it me, or is it becoming harder to achieve and maintain SLOs in this age of microservices and dependencies? And there is this nasty little thing called latency, right?
Well, we are, you're always up against some sort of speed of light for sure. And there is a lot of risk management. I would say one of the challenges I see is that teams are, companies are under a lot of pressure. We're under a lot of economic pressure. People have to keep up with the competition. There's been a lot of DIY solutions where companies have tried to build infrastructure that maybe they weren't, their core competency. They've built up technical debt over time. All of those things contribute to difficulty. And I like to say that reliability is invisible until it isn't. And so now, convincing organizations that uptime is critical to their reputation, to their bottom line, it's becoming more and more obvious this is important. However, you still need to make a significant investment to make that happen. So I think one of the big shifts happening now with smaller teams and more focus, more scrutiny over spending, less DIY projects, more people adopting solutions that are proven, and that is helping people kind of move in the right direction. Now, the whole services concept to me, I think, is a really powerful concept. But you're right, you are the advantage is that I can do things I want, take other things as a service. For example, cloud, right? I mean, it's great to not have to run data centers. However, you are taking a dependency on something that can go down. Microservices, if done correctly, the idea is to accept failure, build resiliency, because you have small amounts of failure all over the place, but that aggregates into a more reliable system as a whole. Not everybody is able to achieve that result because they haven't necessarily designed the system for failure, right? Expected failure, or they haven't clearly quantified the amount of expected failure that's normal versus abnormal. And that leads them to noisy alerts or not designing resilient systems. This is where SLOs come in. It's really about clarifying not only my service, what's the expectation of my service, but also my dependencies. I use database X, I use cloud Y. What do I expect from those services? How do I get an early warning system on those services? How do I hold my vendors accountable? Or if I have a cross-team dependency with maybe another department or shared services or a platform, building that clear expectation, negotiating that and defining it in code is really, really powerful and gives these teams the ability to much more clearly communicate how the service should work and quantify the risk. That, I think, is one of the big changes that will allow people to overcome this challenge. Brute forcing your way to reliability simply doesn't work. The systems are too complicated, and the amount of effort you have to put in to keep systems up and running perfectly, difficult. Your CEO might want your service to be perfect, but they're not really willing to pay for it. That's the dirty little secret. So you got to come up with a compromise And the compromise is, finding this perfect balance between excellence, customer service excellence, and efficient delivery. And that's what the SLOs ideally should be. It's a moving target, which means you need to have a process and a system for keeping it up to date as expectations change, as customers change, as your competition changes. But yeah, fundamentally, this is where we're going. We've got to get resilient systems is how we get to reliable systems.
So back in the day, the joke was that the SLO wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Obviously, we're no longer writing SLOs in paper. So how has the accountability equation changed? And what do I say to somebody when the SLO is not met?
Well, accountability is an interesting word here because, if we try to set people up for failure, right, where they have expectations or SLAs that they couldn't possibly reach, it might be great for the sales team to sign an SLA of 5 nines or 6 nines, but not necessarily great for the engineering team to have to deliver that feature to their to their customers and carry the pager, and are going to be one penalized for it. So accountability to me really starts with understanding what's possible, what's expected, what's financially responsible, and having that clearly defined. I agree with you. Like, if it's not written down, it doesn't matter. And in this case, what we really are advocating for is not putting in a contract, but putting it into code. And code is so much clearer because you have to get it right. It does what it's told, right? There's no room for sort of interpretation, if you know what I mean. So there's a very good point about the importance of clarifying it, having it in writing. In fact, having it in a structured format. But you might have heard a lot about sort of blameless postmortems and not pointing blame. One of the terms I've heard recently is being blame aware and thinking about the consequences of blame without removing blame. If we try to tiptoe around blame, it's another way of saying we're not really interested in finding the truth, right? What the real cause was. And oftentimes, things that we could say are human error are really not human error. It's usually systemic issues that we need to address. But as soon as we remove blame from the story, it slows down our investigation. I think there's always consequences to these systems. We have to accept, that it's many, many complicated factors that lead to outages and downtime most of the time. However, sometimes it's just bad actors. Sometimes it's people who are, being irresponsible, checking in code they shouldn't, ignoring test failures. I've heard about some outages recently that were just people pushing code without following the rules. You have to deal with that. And I think having the paper trail, having clear expectations defined, having release processes defined, at least you're all kind of operating from the same rule book. And then you can say, okay, what happened here? But look, people use SLAs to hold their vendors accountable. And in fact, we even use our SLOs. We monitor our third parties. We have conversations with them where we can show them the data. I'll say it's a very different conversation where I can say, look, here was the SLO. Here's the error budget you depleted. Here's the outage. Here's the impact from our customers. I've got the full record of it. And we generate that very easily out of Noble 9. We use it for our own, dog fooding on all of our own services and all of our vendors. It's a very different conversation with the vendor than I've ever had before. And we've been able to negotiate in much better faith because we're operating from the same data. This is a game changer. And I wish more people could experience this because I've seen too many times where a lot of finger pointing, blame game, and people kind of, pulling out the contract, which never a good sign for building a strong technical partnership when we dig out the contract and see what does the SLA actually say. So accountability, I think, is part of the equation. But most engineers I've worked with really care more about being productive and solving problems than pointing fingers and yelling. But that often seems to be the mode we operate in.
How automated can all this get? Because if I can see something is going awry in the SLO, can I make adjustments on some back-end service automatically that would bring the application back in line with the SLO, whether that's additional compute resources or more network bandwidth or something? Can I, really close the loop?
Yeah, it's a great point. There is, I would say, there is always a limit to automation. And this is a general principle that, there's the paradox of automation that the more you automate something, the less you're involved, but the criticality increases. Think of it like you have a self-driving car. You can take a nap while the car is self-driving, until it's about to have an accident, you need to grab the wheel. And automation for our operations systems, it kind of works the same way. So there is a limit to how much we can automate these things. However, in some cases, there is obvious automation that you can do. or you can do it as a first response to a human response. So, for example, you gave an example of adding compute resources. Let's say we have an SLO on a service that can auto scale, and we see that the latency is creeping up. Well, before I wake somebody up to go investigate that, if I can easily trigger a proactive automation to increase capacity on the servers, maybe increase the replicas in the Kubernetes cluster, and see if that affects the latency. If it continues, then I can trigger, an on-call to go and investigate it by hand and do things. Just having those kinds of rules in place reduces the burden and the toil on the humans in those situations. Another common pattern is set an SLO for release. So if the software rollout is happening and the SLO starts to degrade, go ahead and roll back the software. Maybe use feature flags or some other method for that. So this is the idea of trying to de-escalate, right? De-escalate the situation so that we can deal with problems in due course of business as opposed to in on-call emergencies. And I think that philosophy, using the automation in that context, and you can still, file a bug so it gets investigated tomorrow. That's another great option, right? We have something that looks like a problem, it's restoring itself. But listen, I've heard more than anything, I hear people who say, I got alerted, I woke up, I started to investigate, and by the time I started investigating, the system was back to normal. That's actually the status for most people, is that these big blips that trigger traditional alerting, they create a lot of noise and turmoil for the teams, and they correct themselves by the time they get to it anyway. So we say, well, let's take a more sophisticated approach, set an SLO over it, and those minor blips won't trigger the alert, but true trends will rise to the top. Those will lead to more accurate alerting. And this completely changes the approach for teams, because they're reacting to real impact, not responding to things that have corrected themselves. And they're also dealing with stuff like in a more non-emergency way, which leads to team happiness, productivity, health, all the other things that we want. We don't want our teams to be alerted, except when it's a real emergency, right? And developers I've worked with are all happy to be on call. They just get frustrated when they start getting page load time over nonsense, or if they don't have the tool to do preventative measures. They see the postmortem and they can't fix it because management doesn't listen to them and has all this feature pressure. So now with SLOs, you get to regulate that. You have something that can really clearly express the situation that the management team, product management, engineering, operations can all agree on. That's, I think, really the trick to this whole thing. So automation is a key part of it, but it's about using that in concert with the human interactions and human decision making on top of the automation, so you have a more balanced approach to managing the environment.
All right. Well, what you described is what I would call a Danger Will Robinson feature, but do you think artificial intelligence will play a larger role in this as we go forward?
I would be surprised if people don't say that it does. I'm going to start with that. It's interesting because personally, I would never hand the keys of my critical operations systems to artificial intelligence, at least not at this stage. I think that where I've seen it be effective is in things that are kind of offline from the production system. So anomaly detection, we have looked at and are investing in some AI around SLO setting. So basically defining what the SLO should be from the historical data. That's an area that we think that there's an opportunity, which is different than saying, oh, we're going to replace the human operators with AI. So I think as an analytics tool, I think it's really powerful. I think as for specialized cases that are well defined, I think it can work quite well. I think AI for like generating tests and generating test traffic and synthetics and things like that, I think it could be useful as well. But at this point, I personally don't see how it's going to take over operations anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's that one thing that you see people doing over and over again as they kind of approach SLOs and that you wish that they knew and we could just cut to the chase earlier?
Yeah, this what I would say is quite funny to me, actually, because I see this so many times. They go, I talk to customers or potential customers or practitioners who are trying to do SLOs, and they go, well, we're not sophisticated enough to do SLOs. When we're more reliable, we'll start doing SLOs. And I can't tell you how many times I hear this, but I just think it's completely backwards because, the result is that you get to be more reliable because you set a baseline, you started measuring, you're incrementally improving. It's kind of like saying, well, I'll start going to the gym once I get stronger. I'll start dieting once I lose weight. It's kind of backwards. So the one thing I would encourage people is, even if your service is immature, even if you have, let's say, 9.5s instead of 5.9s, it doesn't matter. You can start with SLOs. You can start the process now. It's really easy to get started. It's easier than it's ever been to get started, and there's tons of resources. I have to give a quick plug for SlowConf in May, slowconf.com. We're about to announce the speakers. The lineup is going to be huge. The education around this is immense. It's easy to get started, and it's simple to get started. I wish people would look at it that way as the beginning of the journey, not something they will do, once they get around to it down the line.
All right. Well, as the saying goes, things measured are things done, and SLOs are the start to the path. Kit, thanks 100%. For being on the show.
Great to see you, Mike. Take care.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Peter Smales, who is General Manager for Enterprise Container Management Business Unit for SUSE. There's a mouthful for you. And we're going to be talking about what exactly is the progress we're seeing around cloud native these days, and what do you expect in the future. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like we've all been on this cloud native journey for quite some time, and yet if I go talk to organizations, I would say the percentage of applications that they're running that are container-based and cloud-native-based is still relatively small compared to the legacy monolithic stuff that we've seen in the past. So where are we on this adventure from your perspective?
I think that's an accurate, I think that remains an accurate assessment. We're still easily sub 10%. And so the wave, I think we're collectively riding. I say we as in just the overall community of enterprise container management technologies and solutions are ultimately gated to, adoption, right? Of either, net new containers, net new applications getting created, transformation of legacy. But that to me is that's opportunity, right? It's still, the market is still practically speaking nascent. And I know we'll come back to this, but it kind of speaks to it. It aligns that sort of, my word is maturity. We are still riding this wave of evolution of the market. And so there's some interesting trends that we're seeing related to that maturation, but you're absolutely right that we're still, I don't want to say early days, because that sounds too, like sandboxy and, non-production-y type stuff. And we're definitely not in the early days, but given the number of applications that exist and given the level of infrastructure maturity that's required to take this legacy, take all these legacy applications or some percentage of them into cloud native, it's a heavy lift and that's going to take time. But we're definitely seeing the market mature, and clearly it's indicative in our business growth and that kind of stuff.
What are you hearing from folks in terms of the challenges that they're running into? Because it seems like, we are getting some hands-on experience now, and a lot of the feedback you hear from folks is, wow, this stuff isn't easy.
Yeah, but if we had a dime for every, sort of every technology thing that folks ended up saying at some point in time, it wasn't easy. Again, the more people that are saying this isn't necessarily easy is also an indication of adoption, if you will, because there's just more, there are more people talking about it. But in terms of what we're, from our vantage point, we're seeing, I'd say two things sort of jump to mind in terms of what, number one, I don't think anyone's ever said that, Kubernetes was, or, container management was easy. That was part of what, Kubernetes was invented for. That's why Rancher, our flagship product, has been so successful, because it basically makes Kubernetes and containers easy. That's the whole premise of the product. But we're kind of seeing two things happening right now. Number one is, and I think this is a strong sign of maturation, is that security is probably the hottest topic that we talk about now. And as you know, we have a horse in that race with our new vector technology that we've had in the stable, over the last, over a year now since the acquisition in 21. And so security has become a front and center conversation, and not, interesting enough, necessarily as just an add-on, sort of like, oh, you have containers, now you need security. It's like security is just so front and center that it also creates kind of its own entry point. So I I wouldn't say that that ties directly to the simplicity comment that we were just talking about before. I think just more from a business and strategy standpoint, it's absolutely the level of interest that we're seeing, specifically with New Vector, but in general with just the conversation around security is that's a big one. That's definitely front and center. And so lots of conversations going on that front. And obviously we're doing, as we talk more about this, we're obviously doing lots of fun stuff on the security front with the New Vector tech. The second thing that I would mention is the continued convergence, if you will, or closer and closer alignment or collaboration between, say, IT ops and DevOps. And I think this speaks directly to your earlier comment about containerization of applications. Because look, the reality was, Rancher in particular, sort of where we came from and where we cut our teeth was largely on the IT ops side. How do you, people trying to deploy Kubernetes as a service, how do you make it easy to stand up a container and to deploy the container and then manage multiple clusters? And, and that's where Rancher really cut its teeth and where, it kind of gained its fame. But the real heavy lifting that's going to drive that increase, that wave we were just talking about in terms of additional application development is on the DevOps front. So increasingly more conversations that we're getting closer and closer to the DevOps communities. The DevOps folks within the organizations that we're talking to are more vocal. They're more involved in the discussion. They carry an increasing amount of clout because there are that many more projects. Maybe they're not in production yet, but there's that many more initiatives around more, the more and more people. In fact, interesting metrics. It's like, if you look at it, there are 22 million developers in the world. Yes, give or take. I heard that number may be a year or two old, but there's something on the order of like 22 million developers. And I'm not saying that all of them are doing, containers and Kubernetes, but where we're seeing what's backing up our view on this increased focus on the DevOps side is things like Rancher Desktop, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is literally, that is our manifestation of Rancher. It's not about the cluster management. It's about the ability to just put that developer experience right in your desktop, make it easy to stand up containers, to stand up a cluster, et cetera, with Rancher Desktop. That thing's growing like a weed, open source project, tons of adoption there. And I think that just speaks to the fact that more and more people are kicking their tires. So, if I look at it in macro, right now we have, north of, something, you spitballing, 40,000 plus, active users of Rancher, on the management side, practically. But then compare that with 22 million developers. If we can get 1% of those people using Rancher Desktop, if you just, making that number up, now you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, that are now developers focused on container technology. And so that's another. So with things like Rancher Desktop, we're seeing really strong adoption of the Rancher Desktop stuff. We're seeing a lot of interest in our Opinio technology, which that's another open source project, which is like really focused on it's a PaaS. So it actually works in collaboration with Rancher. So you sort of give people a more opinionated way to just package things up and simplify the deployment, less CI/CD work, kind of mask all that. So any and all things related to making it easier for the developer folks to be building those apps, developing those apps, et cetera, that'd be the second trend. And then one more, and then I promise I'll shut up. The other interesting thing is, particularly on the edge, I'm sure you've heard us talk about Harvester. Harvester is another open source project. It's cloud native HCI, but where we're seeing interest there is largely on the edge, where folks you have these environments where they want to essentially build out their their ability to manage these edge deployments in a cloud native way. But the applications that they're potentially running could be a POS. It could be, who knows what the application could be. But some of these applications are still, they're VM based, they're traditional applications. So they haven't been, they're not cloud native apps per se. So we see organizations that want to manage cloud native, but then they've got this, they're in this tweener state where they've got some potential legacy applications that they're going to continue to run, not necessarily, turn them into microservices, but basically run these apps in a containerized environment. And that's where stuff like Harvester comes into play. So that's I'll pause there, but I think all of those, to answer your question very, very concisely, security definitely continues to pop up because we're seeing that in the interest in new vector in the discussions. The developer experience continues to become increasingly an increasingly important topic. And we're sort of seeing that through things like Rancher desktop interest and Opinio interest. And then sort of this convergence, if you will, of sort of traditional legacy and cloud native in our world, largely on the edge side. We're seeing that through things like, interest in our Harvester technology. But ideally, I think that all speaks to kind of the evolution of the market.
Did we underestimate what it would take to bring developers along? Because we've been at this now for, I think, 7 years maybe, or depending on where you got started in the thing. But maybe we assumed that developers were going to play at a much lower level of access. And then it turns out maybe they don't want to deal with a wall of YAML files.
Yeah. I'm an eternal optimist, so I don't know. I can't speak to whether we overestimated or underestimated, whichever way that you look at it. But I think that at the same time as, like the more you give, the more that you're asked for, right? I mean, obviously the people obviously want this to be is, if we look back in 10 years, 5 years, whatever, they don't know exactly what the timeline is, then, CNI, cloud native development environments and so forth will be as common as Go, or it'll be completely embedded in the DNA of the developer community. At least that's the wave I think we're collectively riding.
As we kind of ponder this, are we in danger of now going to the other extreme where Kubernetes and containers is it's the fashion platform of the day, but maybe a lot of the things we're building aren't fit for Kubernetes, and we're going to have to figure out how to use everything from serverless frameworks on one side to traditional virtual machines on the other, and maybe we need to have some better advice for folks about what to use when.
Yeah, and more. Can you expand on that? Like more specific, if you're talking about like serverless versus containers, like what do where are you going with that?
Well, there's a lot of folks who are starting to talk about a lot of the applications that are starting to show up on Kubernetes, maybe not ideal for that platform. And we need to have a conversation amongst ourselves about which platforms to use for what, when.
And from your vantage point, give me an example, if you would, of like, you're talking about stateful, or you're talking about highly transactional, like what are you hearing?
Well, stateful is one example where it is a religious argument almost between folks about whether or not you should use Kubernetes for a stateful application. There are also folks who just think that a lot of the applications, to quote Kelsey Hightower recently, are garbage. So
now on the first one, I mean, look, I don't think we'll have, I think we all know this. There's not going to be, the entire world is not going to go completely to, cloud native. Not every application is going to necessarily be built, containerized or go become container native. I think that would be a stretch. So I generally agree with the comment. I don't agree with sort of the blanket. There's a discussion to be had about whether or not you want to be running stateful applications in that environment, because there's a different set of requirements. I think the jury's out to a certain extent. We've got plenty of people that are running stateful applications. This is one of the reasons, things like why we developed Longhorn, is because if you're going to run stateful apps, you need persistent storage. And, the adoption numbers on Longhorn are fantastic. So that's not to say that every stateful application is getting containerized. But I think that we're on the stateful side, we're building the technology we think is fit for purpose to support the requirements of those applications. To your second point, though, I'm interested to hear, obviously, Kelsey's a very interesting guy with with great insights and such. So was his comment that there are a lot of, container-based new container apps that are garbage? Like, was he saying that there's old apps that are garbage that you'd never want to move over? Or was it more about what's getting built new that's kind of garbage?
Well, to be specific, he was basically saying a lot of the newer applications probably should go to a serverless framework and shouldn't be on Kubernetes in the first place, because they're just not, they don't require that level of sophistication and complexity, and the underlying management platform is built for something that is highly distributed, that would be deployed across a hyperscaler kind of environment. Now, that might be his bias, but that's his point of view.
No, but I would concur with that. I think that I can't concur with whether something is garbage or not. I won't, I'll leave that to Kelsey to apply his judgment on that. But I think that what he just explained, it kind of ties back to the roots of what we've been trying to do from day one with the rancher stuff, right? Which is that ultimately it is about abstraction. I mean, if you remember we still talk about this now, it's sort of like computing everywhere. Like ultimately it's this notion of computing everywhere. You leverage Kubernetes everywhere in order for you to compute everywhere. So write once, run many, and our raison d'etre with the rancher stuff has always been about the value isn't in the distributions. The distributions are going to commoditize. They need to be everywhere, anywhere you want to compute, and the cool thing about that is with things like K3S, planes, trains, automobiles, satellites, drones, like tanks. Kubernetes is, it's not literally everywhere, but the applications are really myriad. But I do agree with Kelsey that where Kubernetes is not, K3S is lightweight, admittedly. Kubernetes overall, is not light, if you will, or it's not super simple. You can use tools like Rancher and the things that we deliver to make things simple. But the technology was largely designed to create a complete abstraction layer for you to be able to ultimately compute anywhere. So again, I don't know specifically what Kelsey was talking about on those. I'm sure there's certain applications that it's a complete waste of time to try and containerize them because there's no point. But but there's still, ultimately there is still I think it ties back to the fact that there's supply and demand now, which is we have an increasing number of people that are using containers, that are investigating containers. We're still, relatively speaking, we have a lot of maturity, but we're still early. Like we haven't, the hockey stick continues largely on the developer side. And I feel like that's, if you accelerate the developer side of things, and to your point, it's not like this, oh my God, this is the first year we're talking about DevOps. It's not a new discussion. We've had, if you remember Rio, we've had multiple cuts at trying to do PaaS and trying to make it simple. And when you go opinionated, that can be hard because you have to predict, we got it right with Rancher because we've just made everything so simple. I think the developer side is just because there's such a myriad universe and community of developers, it's harder to find that common ground. And so I think it takes longer. It can be complicated. There's going to be more thrashing. But again, I come back to things like, Rancher Desktop, just in general, like the more we can watch those communities grow and mainstream, then there's obviously going to be more and more need and more questions and requirements from additional developers. But that's all goodness. If you just look at an adoption-led go-to-market model, that's all goodness because the issue isn't, well, nobody's interested in Rancher Desktop, like that's not the problem, kind of thing. Like the challenge that we have collectively is making this stuff simpler, continuing to make it simpler on the Rancher side, from a infrastructure management side, and then continuing to simplify things and mature things, on the dev side.
So what ultimately will decide the issue as to which container platform people will use, which distributions, which PaaSes, what are they going to look for from a provider?
That is a very good question. And I think to a certain extent, our approach has always been very, what we call open interoperable. And that's not to say that we don't care, if you will, but the nature of we don't, honestly, we can tell you, as it relates to the distribution, we've always said, use the distribution that's purpose built. Like if you're running in AWS, then use the AWS distro. If you're running on GCP, then, use GKE. Like we have always, and that's why, for example, with Rancher, we invested in providing full lifecycle management. So our opinion has always been use the distribution, values and management, use the distribution that is purpose built for the environment or multiple distributions. You could use a myriad of different, ultimately to a certain extent, Rancher customers, or our view on that is that they don't, in terms of distributions and things like that, they don't need to make that decision. They can make that decision based upon business requirements and what they learned about the different platforms. In terms of what applications, I think that's going to be an ongoing discussion of, what is there's so many questions. It's compliant. There's certain applications that'll never move over. They're going to be traditional legacy on-prem apps. that are never going to go up for security reasons, for compliance reasons, for air gapping reasons, whatever the case may be. There are going to be security issues as to why there'll be compliance, regulatory reasons why they won't do it. There'll be certain applications that just for technology or performance, reasons may not make it. So I don't think it's I don't think there's a singular sort of playbook, if you will, at least as of today, that says, there's certain guardrails, obviously, you can provide good insight on. But I think a lot of that is continuing to evolve. There's no sort of ultimate decider on that, if that makes sense.
All right, folks, you heard it here. It's a brave new world. There's going to be a lot more cloud native applications for sure, but nothing else.
That right.
Nothing else seems to go away. Hey, Peter, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to chatting with you again. Take care.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Discover the cutting-edge insights of our new show, AI Times, a series that explores the limitless potential of artificial intelligence. Sponsored by the AI Infrastructure Alliance, the AI Times is at the forefront of the AI revolution, tackling the crucial questions of how we can leverage AI for the betterment of humanity. Stay ahead of the curve as this show delves into all things surrounding AI, including trends, pressing concerns, and the positive impact AI is making around the globe. AI Times.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. And alongside the airing of The Haunted Hacker and our extensive conference sessions, we had plenty of great content today. We'll be back again tomorrow, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.